In the annals of time, riding social forces as they crest and crash onto the shores of history, some would-be heroes stumble but manage to recover their breath. Others are reduced to the flotsam and jetsam of nostalgia. These others are our subjects. They are the vanquished, 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 vanquished.
Welcome to The Vanquished. Anders J. Lee here with my co-host FreddyG.
So happy to be here.
And today we have a guest, comedian extraordinaire Mike Kaplan.
Hello.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Indeed. And we are nearing a 20-year anniversary that I feel like is being a little underplayed.
Congratulations.
Well, to congratulate the country, and namely George W. Bush, for this anniversary. I feel like I have not seen enough content in the news media, social media, about the 2004 election.
And it was the most important election of my lifetime, is what I was told back then. It was the first most important election of my lifetime.
Yeah.
Wow.
2004, I was 13 years old, and I was really invested in this election because I think there's a brew of things, starting with Fahrenheit 9/11, which I saw on my 13th birthday, the day I was bullied into leaving summer camp. It all kind of came to a head there, and for some reason that instilled in me a passion to defeat George W. Bush, which then also meant elect John Kerry, which is kind of a secondary thing to the defeating George W. Bush, I feel like.
This was when I surveyed, I asked people what they thought about John Kerry. One guy said anybody but Bush, and that was his strongest thing.
I'm just impressed that you at 13 were so politically engaged as to be aware. Because I'm like, I was 13. I guess I knew when I was 13, it was like 1991.
Okay.
And so it was approaching the George H.W. Bush and Clinton and Perot. So that was the only thing I knew when I was 13. I was like, oh, weird, a third guy. They only taught us about there being two guys possible. Like the first election that I was legally able to vote in was 96, and I don't know if I did.
Okay.
I lived in a state I would have voted for Clinton. I don't think I registered in time. My family was not they were Democrats, and we just didn't, it wasn't a political, we didn't have discussions about politics really that much in my home growing up that I remember. They could have been having them, not with me. And I remember being at a family weekend at my first year of college, which started in 1996. And my family was there, and then a friend of mine, her family was there, and we were talking about voting. And I might have said something like, yeah, I don't know about if I voted this time, maybe it had just happened, and they were like, you gotta vote. And I was like, oh, you do gotta vote. That was, I really learned in college. And so I definitely, in 2000, I know I'm taking the long way around here, I absolutely voted, probably for Ralph Nader, in Massachusetts, where it was clear that it was gonna be okay. Mm-hmm. And I remember I was dating a woman who voted for George W. Bush, and I asked her why. I think we started dating afterward. We started dating after the election, and I asked, why did you vote for George W. Bush? And she said, well, I just had a feeling that he was going to win, and I wanted to be on the winning team. And I was like, well, I really think that's not how, it's not like a bet. It's not like you don't, in fact, what if she was the one, what if she thought the other thing, and that it was half and half? But it probably wouldn't have mattered. But then, 2004. So
but this woman, because of that, you wanted to then be in a relationship with her, because that would thereby make you a winner.
Obviously by little, I was like, that does make sense. So I don't have strong. I mean, I definitely started following politics much more than I ever had, and so I do remember voting in 2004 and being aware and caring and wanting the war in Iraq to end, and I'm just kind of anti-war. I'm pro-peace. People always talk about being anti-war. That's kind of like a war mentality.
Yeah.
I'm a pro-peace guy. I like peace, please. So that was why I was voting for peace in 2004. I called my mom earlier today, told her I was coming to do the podcast, and she was like, Kerry, like he's married to the Heinz ketchup fortune, and I was like, that's what she's like. Oh yeah, my people. My mom loves ketchup. She did say recently she has started purchasing some other. She's not just a loyal Heinzist.
Going Hunts?
I think some other maybe like organic ones.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe not positive.
Yeah.
She didn't give me. She said it's not always Heinz in case anyone comes over to my mom's house and finds alternate ketchups.
But she's a ketchup enthusiast.
She ketchup for sure.
How does she spell it?
I'm with a K.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know who does the CAT.
It's weird.
I feel like
That
they're
seems
fake
British.
people.
You
Can
should
I
do
say-
an episode of this podcast where I feel like that's like the runner-up.
Yeah, right.
Vanquished
Spelling
it.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. So my mom said, I asked my mom about Kerry. She said he was a jerk and he was married to some rich woman. I think she was from the Hertz family. So
Close. Starts with H,
Yeah.
E, ends with Z.
Yeah.
60% there.
Yeah.
yeah, that's good. Yeah, it's good memory. Yeah, especially because when I had asked her who Mitt Romney was, she confused Mitt Romney and John Kerry a lot. And yeah, they are. Yeah, they're like twins.
Tall, blank, white guy.
Yeah. They're also like kind of rivals. They played each other in debate. They love crapping on each other for things that they themselves do. They're like weird mirror images.
Yeah.
Wow.
I remember, so my parents were, I can admit this now, liberal Kerry supporters.
Whoa.
But they were not
Shocking.
public about it because my dad worked at the time for Minnesota Public Radio and took that job very seriously, like being nonpartisan, like outwardly, even though nobody would have cared. But he worked not even in the news division. He was a classical music reporter, but he was still very concerned that he would be seen with me dragging around my Carrie Edwards sign at the Minnesota State Fair. He's like, you're
journalistic integrity.
right. He's like,
Yeah.
you're not supposed to have bumper stickers if you work for a news organization.
And you as a child were his property, and so therefore, yeah, that's really interesting. Also, just it's fascinating. I don't think I've ever heard these words in that order together as a phrase. Classical music reporter.
Yes.
Mozart's still dead.
I mean, that's true. Maybe there are people still making classical music, or was classical a period of time that is over and thus there cannot be anymore? You can cover concerts of classical music for sure.
That's a lot of what it is. Yeah, he worked there's a show on National Public Radio called Performance Today, and he was one of the producers for that, just kind of like about up-and-coming composers and different classical music's goings on.
Cool.
And but in Minnesota, he was actually he was a part of the arts reporting division with his specialty in classical music, and now he writes for a trade publication, Chorus America, which covers choral music happenings. So
I love all of this. This is great.
he's
So wholesome.
My parents are both music teachers.
Really?
For most of my life.
I'll have to have my dad write about them.
Yeah, please.
My dad was bad at guitar, but he would bring it to his special ed class, and all of his assistants would sing, and it was really sweet.
I wrote a song today.
Really?
I did.
Nice.
I wrote a concerto.
Yeah. It's not classical, so I don't know if he'll want to cover it. But I watched, Reggie Watts.
Yes.
Reggie Watts has a new
fan.
TED Talk that just came out, and I really enjoyed it. And it was about improvisation, so I was like, this is inspiring me. So I got my recording equipment out, and I recorded. I kind of improvised a song that the song is called Reggie Watts. I really enjoyed your TED Talk, and those are the lyrics.
John Kerry was like the TED Talk of candidates. Like Bush is like a snappy slogan, and John Kerry's giving a full TED Talk. My thing with John Kerry is, and I did vote for him in 2004. After there was no WMDs, I was like, I'm going to vote for the Democrats. And I'm like, I don't like this John Kerry guy. And then my friend showed me a website. John Kerry is a douchebag, but I'm voting for him anyway.com. And that is what's convinced me. Calling John Kerry a douchebag was the enlightened way to see him. South Park did it. South Park had the episode about this election. Giant douche versus turd sandwich. Who are you voting for?
Right.
Wow.
And I mean, it well describes these candidates, yeah.
Right.
Because, John Kerry was not super likable, and Bush had a little bit of charm, but terribly unlikable policies.
Yeah. See, this was really the first and last election in which I was like a partisan of either side, because, I have some investment in elections after that, obviously, but I didn't even think about why I want John Kerry to be president and what he's going to actually do and why that's better than Bush. I just wanted him because he was not Bush, and like defeat Bush. I hate Bush at all costs. That was like so anything about like his personal qualities being bad or whatever just I didn't even actually scrutinize it. I was just like, no, we need him.
You're like, scrutinize that.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, the Iraq War is the worst presidential decision of our lifetimes.
Yeah.
Lying, killing a lot of people, wasting a lot of money, losing credibility, all that stuff. So it was a good reason to vote against him. And I'm still mad that there was no WMDs and Kerry still lost worse than Al Gore had lost.
Yes. So John Kerry, the man, there's actually a lot of stuff that in his past that is very interesting. He was a child of a diplomat and grew up in elite circles and, of course, went to Vietnam. You could tell from an early age, basically everyone says that he wanted to be like the president. And then he goes to Vietnam, comes back, protests the war. That's kind of how he becomes a national figure. As a veteran against the war. We will do another episode, bonus episode, more about his past, his upbringing, his activism, etc. But there's like 30 years go by, and people have kind of forgotten about him by the time he's starting to run for president. He's vetted as vice president a couple times. I think first in 1992, Clinton considers him a little bit. And then he's also vetted in 2000 to be Al Gore's VP. Maybe that would have been a better pick than Lieberman, who's to say. But he
doesn't inspire the same kind of Liebermania as Lieberman. Lieberman had the Jewish thing. He's a little more, maybe a little more charismatic.
Charismatic?
Yeah.
Oh, there you go.
No one's ever used that term before, but Kerry is one of our least charismatic. Yeah, Mitt Romney has way more charisma.
Right. After
spending a lot of time learning about both of them, I find Mitt Romney a lot more fun to learn about.
Definitely
and
better
that's
looking.
insulting. Yeah.
Kerry is, he's a weird-looking guy. It's his face. I mean, I remember that being the knock on him, which I couldn't process at the time because I was just so zealously pro-Kerry. But his face is enormous. That wasn't just a joke. Like, it looks like, I've said this before, it looks like a ship. You know, it's an enormous face, especially now he has all this Botox. It's like he could break somebody's bone.
He looks like a ship, and he's got a lot of Botox.
Oh my!
There you go.
Good night, everybody.
He did look like he was running from Mount Rushmore. His old face. Then, post Vanquished, he gets this terrible plastic surgery, and he just looks terrible now.
Yeah. And I think he's getting it because he still wants to run for president. And I think there's something in the back of his head that thinks,
he's 80 now, right?
2032, around that. We'll get to this, but he's considered running like every election since 2004, and just no one has cared. But, after Bush is elected, 9/11 happens. Obviously, that war.
What's that?
Oh, yeah.
Well, in Chile in 1973. No, but, the Democrats have to kind of acquiesce to being very hawkish. Some of them are already there. And he's, interestingly, was an opponent of the first Gulf War. And there's a lot of these guys who were from the Vietnam generation. And by 1991, they're still they have what was called Vietnam syndrome. Were skeptical of foreign intervention. And so he didn't think the Gulf War was a good idea. And it's, I still don't think it was, but it was seen as like a whirling success. So all these guys now have egg on their face. And by the early 2000s, they've switched gears. There's a mentality of we're in a new world. War is different. It's not going to be as hard. It's, we don't even need as many troops. You can just knock out these Middle Eastern non-state actors and, in some cases, states much more easily. But
isn't it great how war is so easy now in 2024?
Right.
I did want to say I'm jealous of you. In 2004, we could vote for an anti-war candidate. We do not have that luxury in 2024.
I'm a Kucinich guy.
Yeah. Well,
this
Kerry,
year too. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I might write him in, honestly.
I think he was RFK Jr.'s campaign manager or something this year. Yeah. At some
he
point,
was for a little bit. Then he
Really?
left over Gaza because he couldn't conscience it. But I feel like this Kerry was, as we'll get to, ultimately not that anti-war because he has a very kind of confounding position on the Iraq War. That,
Can I give a little post 9/11 Bush stuff?
Yeah.
So yeah, 9/11 happens that night. All the congressmen from both parties, they go to the steps of the Capitol. They sing "God Bless America" together. John Kerry's there, Hillary Clinton's there. Everyone's united. Bush goes to the ground zero a few days later. He's talking into a megaphone. He says, "I can't." Someone says, "I can't hear you," and he delivers one of the greatest presidential lines. He says, "Well, the people who knock these towers down, they're soon going to hear all of us." And he's like 80, 90% approval. He goes to the World Series. Derek Jeter says you got to throw first pitch from the mound or they'll boo you.
Right.
It's in New York. He's wearing a bulletproof vest. He throws a strike. He's just like king. He's like basically our king at that point. Yeah.
So what happened?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. They sweep in 02. They do great in the elections, but then the shift for Afghanistan's popular.
And they make in 2002 they make Iraq an election issue.
Yeah.
Because they put a lot of pressure on the entire Senate, but especially Democrats, to approve this war ahead of the election.
Yeah. And we'll get it. Yeah, we'll get into the war vote, but yeah, Iraq increasingly changes it, and we go back to super polarization by 03.
But obviously, like most politicians, he was very pro war in Afghanistan. But the critique of Bush starts to emerge because they say he let bin Laden get away at Tora Bora. And, it's possible maybe Rumsfeld is maybe responsible for letting bin Laden get away, would you say?
Yeah, I kind of just feel like I kind of conspiracy think that they maybe wanted bin Laden to get away so they could keep doing the war on terror. And I'm not saying Bush himself, because Bush himself in one of the memoirs, they say he's really pissed. But like maybe the neocons wanted to keep the war on terror going, because they don't like send like like SEAL Team 6 or a bunch of like awesome people to go get him. They just outsource this to some Afghani warlords who let him get away at Tora Bora.
Yeah.
And then he's just in Pakistan for like a decade before Obama takes him out.
Right.
Well, maybe they didn't know at that point how good SEAL Team 6 was because they hadn't yet captured Osama bin Laden.
Oh man,
That was what made them. That's
Yeah.
what made me know how good they are. So maybe they weren't aware yet.
Yeah, I was a SEAL Team 3 guy until then. Yeah. Their time has passed.
Well, obviously now we look back at the Iraq War. It's prefaced on lies, propaganda regarding WMDs. They kept repeating this line, we don't want the smoking gun to be a mushroom cloud. And so that is, really putting pressure on senators who are up for re-election, but also senators who want to run for president, including John Kerry. It's hard to tell what he really believes here. I kind of do want to give him the benefit of the doubt, which is ultimately not a good thing that he was this bad on this issue. But he really thought he was giving Bush the permission to hypothetically start a war after you meet certain thresholds, and he didn't think Bush would either do the war or do it unilaterally, and he wound up sorely mistaken. But how do you?
Can I say? Yeah,
this
let me
position?
say. Yeah. So from Kerry's memoirs, he says they wanted to do a thing where the first vote was just for inspections and a UN resolution, whatever, and then they would need a second vote to go to war. And then he says the Democratic minority leader made us vote up or down on the war, yes or no, and I didn't want to, as a future presidential candidate, vote against it because as president I want to have that. And he doesn't mention the minority leader by name, but it is Dick Gephardt who is the minority leader until that election.
For the House, right?
Yeah, this is the House. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Maybe he's talking about the Senate one. That's a good point.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now I can't remember if he was talking about the House or the Senate minority. Who was the? Do you remember who the?
I want to say Schumer, but I don't know if he was at that.
I don't think. Maybe it's Harry Reid at that point.
Yeah, it was definitely Harry Reid. Yeah.
Yeah. Now I'm trying to remember. Yeah. If it was,
I think voted against the war, actually, but. Anyway.
Oh, okay. Because I can't remember now from the book if it was the House one. Because if it's Gephardt, he doesn't end up making Gephardt his running mate, and some people say that might have helped him. Because Gephardt had appeal in places like Ohio. We'll talk about that.
Interesting. But that vote ends up haunting him, obviously. But again, they thought there was a really, I don't want to say a credible case, but there was a widely accepted case that it was going to go well, that they were going to win the Iraq War fairly easily. And they did topple Saddam easily. But then even if you go back to like 2003, when Kerry's first running for president, he's like asked about Iraq, and he's like, well, I'm hoping that by the time I get sworn in, January 20th, 2005, it's going to be over. So this election may be about a post-Iraq War world, which is kind of bananas.
I hope that this year that's true.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So there's a Bush and they're planning a reconstruction or whatever after the war is like called Phase 4, and they basically are like, well, Phase 4 will take however long it takes, and they did very little planning for it. Mm-hmm. There's one guy who lands in Iraq after the war, and they're like, okay, what's the Phase 4 plan? And someone's like, oh, we don't have one. You have 24 hours to make one. And it's pretty haphazard, and obviously Phase 4 ends up lasting, I guess, till now. It's still currently going on, but definitely until we leave in 2011-ish.
Yeah, and that's why stand-up is better than improv. You want to have something written.
You want to have a plan.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, you got to have the punchlines before you get on stage.
And just to be clear, everyone, I do like I think improv can be really good.
Yes.
I was just a joke.
We're kind of, you just did it as you were critiquing it.
I'm improving right now.
Yeah.
I didn't write any of this.
I think Bush would be way better at improv than Kerry.
Ha.
Perhaps.
Yeah.
But Kerry, he is up for re-election in 2002. Obviously, he's thinking about president and not re-election because he does not have a Republican opponent. They just don't run anybody. His only competition is a libertarian who he just destroys, gets 80% of the vote. And going into 2003, he has cancer, prostate cancer, has to get surgery, and kind of slow to recover. And he can't even go to some of the early president because he has an exploratory committee before he's running for president, which is feels like it's very of this time where it's you would even have debates with people who are not fully running for president.
Yeah,
they just had exploratory committees, and I feel like now it's you're either in or you're out.
Yeah, so he knew he was running from when Gore lost. And he's getting ready. And then the cancer aspect of it after his surgery goes away. He's not going to have cancer anymore. I mean, as far as I know, I don't think he's had cancer since.
They did an exploratory committee.
Yeah. The exploratory committee went well. But it takes a few weeks to recover. And it's during a key time in February, March. And Dean is getting some momentum during this time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice. We were going to make you do that, but you did it without us asking.
Thank you.
Put it, cut it and paste it wherever you need it.
He also, in his memoir, he's a little upset about Dean not visiting him in the hospital or giving him a call or something, right?
Yeah, there's tension. Yeah, other people said, sent nice things. Dean did a fundraiser in Massachusetts. And Dean's big thing is I'm more against the war than guys like John Kerry who voted for it. Dean didn't have to vote for it. I believe at this point he's a former governor of Vermont.
Yeah.
So a former governor of Vermont can I don't know what he was saying before the war, but he's able to come and be oh, yeah, I would have had the right vote, kind of like Obama in 2008, where no one had asked him to vote at the time, so he can kind of say that he would have done the right thing.
Yeah, we're going to do a future Howard Dean episode. But a lot, because I remember watching interviews with him, and he was saying, well, we're going to have to stay in Iraq. I just wouldn't have done it in the first place. So that was the big question. It wasn't really, do we continue the occupation of this foreign country? Everybody except for Kucinich is saying yes, maybe Al Sharpton, but it is an important point, is were you for or against going in the first place, to which there's a lot of in between. There's the Bush position, very similar to basically the Lieberman position, and then there's the farthest left you get is Kucinich, but there's people like Howard Dean who are we shouldn't have done it, but we can't just pack up and go.
Yeah, Kucinich and Sharpton are willing to be we'll let the UN take over. We will give up the oil. No one else is willing to give up the oil, probably because if you say that, they'll, the powers that be won't let you win.
Right. But he announces, John Kerry does for president on Meet the Press, which is the same show he went on as a 28-year-old when he was wearing his Navy fatigues. And, around this time, you have Bush going on to the USS Abraham Lincoln with the famous Mission Accomplished banner, and is flying in an airplane, which it's at the time I remember as a kid thinking oh, well, the president, they're going to fly around in a jet. Why wouldn't you? If you were the commander in chief of the military, of course you're going to do that stuff. But it is in retrospect thinking, I mean, you guys were a little older at the time. How absurd was that to witness?
It was the most absurd. it didn't make sense. I mean, I think the main thing was that the mission was not accomplished. So that was my main sticking point.
So my annoying secret is that I was very excited about the Iraq War. After 9/11, I was like, we're doing this war on terror. My dad used to be a hippie, got excited. We were excited. We're going to Iraq. We're taking out all the bad. Well, if we take out this one evil guy, the world will be good. I remember so mission accomplished. I think I was still on board. When no WMD happened, I then switched permanently to not liking the Republicans. But yeah, I was still on board at this point. I do want to say U.S. Abraham Lincoln's funny because Abraham Lincoln is another president who thought a war was over too soon. He gets shot and it really hurts the country. So the Republicans have been doing this since their founding.
Yeah, you know, the idea that you had when you were younger.
I was 19 and stupid, and also like they were saying that there was WMDs. They were showing this evidence. How would I have known how to parse the evidence? Even John Kerry couldn't figure it out. So how was I going to figure it out? And since then, I've been anti-war. And every war since is kind of like the Iraq War or Vietnam in the way it's bad.
Yeah, do you guys know this? I forget the exact quote by Solzhenitsyn. I think that's about how like the line between good and evil is not drawn between like any countries or any groups of people, but it goes through every person's heart.
Interesting.
Oh, it's beautiful. Yeah, so I hopefully crossed that line.
Right, like we have the idea. We all have the idea. Even like watching the debates, like this year, be like the bad guys. Like that. It's such a rudimentary idea that there are good people and bad people, and like even clearly like the people are like we have to stay in there to help them and get the oil. Like it's. I mean, there's so many things that are just a story.
Right. Yeah, and by after this election, it doesn't take that long after the 2004 election to where opinion is like pretty steadfastly opposed to the war, and but throughout this whole period, there's a lot of kind of mixed feelings about it.
Wait, can I tell you one quick thing?
Sure.
You said that he went on Meet the Press.
Yeah.
This is just a brief interlude. My mom is very short. My mom watches Meet the Press every Sunday, or DVRs it, and she says. She calls it, I like to watch Meet the Press and get depressed.
Too true.
Yes.
But so we have WMDs. The search for that is going on. They aren't showing up.
WMDs nuts.
Oh yeah, let me say. So Saddam, like they didn't find out what Saddam was doing. He was like kind of just chill, like he was getting old. He's kind of like in like semi-retired. He's writing a novel. He hates Islamic extremism. Okay, but he's a secular Muslim leader. Yeah. He had gotten power by kind of being an anti-communist guy, and he's like, okay, now they got these extremists. Maybe America will be nice to me again because we were nice to him in the '80s until Gulf War times. And then it all blows up in his face and our face and the world's face.
Yeah. Yeah, it was crazy to launch this war. Based on WMDs, obviously they didn't find them. It took the Bush administration until January of 2004 before they finally admit it. And that does turn a lot of people off. They're upset with Bush over that. And they, run an occupation. Just like sometimes I wonder about the Iraq War, and like a counterfactual is like, there's obviously what if we never launched it, but also what if we did launch it and obviously it would still be bad, but if you just had more competent people doing it, I wonder how things would have gone. I mean, still bad in many ways, but
maybe we would have found those WMDs.
Yeah. But it's just every step of the way is just a disaster because the Rumsfeld is neoliberalizing the military. You have all these planners who are like kids basically sent to Iraq to like run public administration and stuff. And it was just every single thing they did was a terrible move. And it made it just a really dismal place.
Well, I'm no expert for sure. So let me have that be the filter through which everything that I say is viewed. But it seems like, technology and society have been advancing like more rapidly and like changing more like than ever before. So like it used to be for, years, decades, hundreds of years, like warfare was one way, like one thing, like this kind of weapon, these kinds of, like there wasn't tons of different kinds of terrains because you're just in the same basic place or it changed very slowly. And now, like people clearly don't have, you either are new and you're like, okay, so I'm going to do a new thing that's never been done before, or this is how they used to do it, and that doesn't apply either. So like the old way doesn't work because everything is different, and new ways are experimental and don't be like, okay. So you just have to, psychic geniuses, and that I think that's the problem is we don't have enough psychic genius. And then there's the whole thing that war is bad.
Yeah,
I agree. Yeah.
And there's probably people not in the military or in the complex at all that are like, man, if I was in there, I'd know what to do, but I don't want to be in there.
Right.
Yeah, IEDs were kind of like, I don't think they anticipated that. It's unclear if Bush knew that Sunnis and Shias would go after each other. It's the different source on this. I do want to say one thing about Rumsfeld in 03. In 2002, he was named one of People's Sexiest Men of the Year. And I have this picture, you guys can see it. He's named sexiest cabinet member, and people are calling this guy who's already
sexiest cabinet member.
Yeah,
not sexiest man.
He's not sexiest man alive, but he's in that issue. Okay. Even being in the issue, because this picture is not sexy. We'll probably show it if we do a video version. And he's called a big flirty pussycat while he's doing like the war in Afghanistan and all this stuff. So like Rumsfeld, no warmonger has ever rode this high before. At least not since the Middle Ages.
Wow,
it's insane the rummy love that's going on at this time.
I mean, with a name like Rummy.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. That is. I mean, he must have had a real good PR team. He needed it.
Yeah. He was good in the press conferences. He was like feisty and like he kind of had that Chris Christie quality where he's feisty but kind of funny. And like everyone wants to kind of see him as like a dad who like they want to love them.
Right. Very good at kind of manipulating media narratives.
And both guys fell apart pretty quickly after those periods.
And thank goodness we never had anyone named Donald to deal with again.
But they have Paul Brenner, who's put in charge of stuff, and he pursues debathification. Basically, taking everybody from Saddam's party and kicking them out of the government, which doesn't go so well.
Yeah, you might not want like the people in charge of like torture or chemical weapons or whatever being in charge. But like if you're a school teacher or like a doctor, you had to join the Ba'ath Party to get your job.
Right.
And then Bremer's like, well, if you've ever been in the Ba'ath Party, you cannot work in this country. And people are like, well, what am I going to do? And Paul's just like, oh, well, definitely don't form a resistance against us because that would be a problem. Yeah. Paul has no Middle East background. He's like a Kissinger disciple and like a management guru. It's unclear if he's ever even been to the Middle East. And he's just like in the green zone doing like jerk things to the Iraqis while he's living large. He's like a viceroy. There's no electricity outside the green zone, and he's in over his head pretty bad.
Yeah. So this is happening. Meanwhile, there's a Democratic primary campaign, and they don't know totally how to respond to it because, at first it's like, well, we're going to have to, Bush is massively popular after 9/11, and that only goes down, but it's only 3 years to 2004, 2003, he's still a little more popular, and so they don't know how to address that. But there is the position that Kerry takes, which is kind of very hard to parse. But you said, Fred, that you were in college at the time, and Kerry was kind of a non.
He was the least cool. So there's the students for Dean. Then the dorkier left-leaning students were for Kucinich.
Oh, yeah.
John Edwards is sexy. Michael Moore endorses Wesley Clark, who's kind of like he's younger, a little younger than Kerry, like 1 year younger, but he's better looking and a higher military rank. So he's going for that range. My one dorky friend who also had red hair, and we'd get confused for each other. He was for John Kerry, and the college Dems were like, well, do you want to set up a Students for John Kerry? And he's like, I am the only one who supports him, so it's already set up. And that was it. And basically until Iowa, John Kerry was really off the radar at this point.
Who did you support?
I think in 03 still like coming off of Bush.
Oh, okay.
Because the WMD, like I said, it was like a gradual process.
Yeah.
I registered to vote after the primary, so I didn't vote. Yeah, I wasn't. I was maybe a political. Oh no, I wasn't even Yeah, I was just kind of like not knowing what. Yeah, I was quite young and immature at this point. But I know Dean. His big line was, "I represent the Democratic wing of the Democratic Party," and it was like, okay, we're gonna fight because John Kerry's vibe is a little bit like Republican light.
Yeah.
He represents the Republican wing of the Democratic Party.
Do you remember? Did you have a favorite in the 04 primaries?
You know, I think by that I was still like, baby stepping my way into politics. So I don't know. I think I followed it, but I don't know if I did like vote in the primary. But I think I liked Dean. And I like Kucinich. He's vegan. I'm vegan. Like, I feel like vibe-wise, like I would have wanted Kucinich to be president of all the people that were running. And also I understood that it seemed like he was, of the candidates, the least likely to become. But, I'm not going to become my girlfriend from the year 2000 and be like, well, he's not going to win, so I'm not going to vote for him. So I think I would have, until he was out of it, I would have supported Kucinich.
If I had a time machine, I'm voting Sharpton. He's my favorite in the debates. We're going to do a Sharpton episode. Yeah, Sharpton was killing it in the debates. Kucinich has great policies, but Sharpton just had like this awesome vibe.
Oh, I'd like them together. Yeah.
Yeah, they could be a ticket.
And Al Sharpton also is in the, I think the first episode of the show Boston Legal, David E. Kelly's.
Really?
Yeah.
That's a good show.
It was a great show. Yeah. James Spader.
I was
William
a Boston
Shatner.
Public guy. It was the public school version.
Boston Public too.
Yeah, it was the public school version.
Yeah.
Very good.
Everything would go wrong. They didn't have a school shooting, but just insane things happened.
Right.
Oh, yeah. That's
old
David
days.
E. Kelly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I wasn't following it very closely. I was 12 for the primaries, but I remember a cartoon strip that I would read. Heart of the City endorsed Howard Dean, and so because of that, I was like, I liked that. I for a while I just I think that was the only one I even knew was out there.
You like cartoons?
Yeah, I mean, he probably got some people that way.
He was killing it.
I
Yeah.
just thought he was. I just knew he was like really mad, and I was also. I just at that point I still didn't really like Bush, and so someone who was mad at Bush seemed to be cool. But
when I don't know if we'll get to this in order, but when the scream happened that ended Dean's run, like I truly I watched it repeatedly and I was like, I don't see the big deal. I feel like it just became a story that people were like, yeah, you can't do that. that makes you look out of control or bad or weird. I'm like, seems like he's passionate and excited and he just likes naming the places that they're gonna win, and I was like, seems cool to me. But
yeah, I mean, it was kind of the culmination of a lot of other stories that we'll cover in the Dean episode. But he's just was kind of a loose cannon. Was the knock on him? Like there's certain fights he would get into with, not physical, but he would just he got really testy with a Bush supporter once, and he would get testy with reporters, and just he seemed a little too unpredictable. So the Democratic establishment didn't like that, and also that there was fear that he would get way outflanked by Bush. There was kind of a fear of putting forward for Democratic primary voters somebody who was like that straight up against the war, even though ultimately he was for continuing it.
Yeah. The big thing with Dean is he blows it by Iowa. Because he's leading, and then he finishes third in Iowa behind Kerry and Edwards. And then he has a chance to redeem himself in New Hampshire, but obviously the scream happens and that really hurts him. And then he finishes second in New Hampshire and he's just done. But he blew a big lead before that. It's kind of like, the Bill Buckner play with the Red Sox, where they had already blown the game at that point, and then the Buckner play just kind of sealed it.
And he was such a good player. I just learned he was. Beloved before that. Really. But also, and then Edwards went and got a haircut. I mean, everyone really screws it all up.
Yeah. Edwards here is kind of like running for vice president, essentially, which he does get that nomination. But he's the one who is I think the last one up, other than Kucinich against Kerry. But Dean is the front runner for a while. He gets endorsed by Gore. Kerry feels betrayed by that since they served in the Senate together. Which is interesting, Gore's trajectory. But
there is in Kerry's memoir, he's like, I called Gore to ask him why he didn't tell me, and the call went dead, and I checked, and I had 4 bars and perfect battery, and then I called 4 more times, it doesn't pick up. So Kerry, this is the first time Kerry got ghosted. Gore was doing ghosting back in 2004. He's always ahead of his time on climate change on ghosting.
And you have in the fall, and this is around the time Dean is leading the polls, the infamous 87 billion vote.
Sorry, and it's 787 billion. Sorry. I wrote it down. Yeah, 787 billion. I'm sorry.
Isn't it 87 billion? I don't know.
I Googled it because I was confused too. I Googled it and I believe it's 787.
Okay, because in that ad, I remember him saying the 87 billion. But anyway, he's voting because Dean is rightfully hammering him for voting for the war, and flip flopping. Dean is really the first person to whip out the flip flop. Against Kerry.
What a ridiculous the idea. Like, can you believe that person changed their mind?
Yeah.
Like, what a thing to like. You didn't think the right thing from when you were born forever. Like, yeah, I've never made any. It's such a weird, like, capitalistic, like systematic, like weird. It's so strange that's a knock on people. Like, sure, if like literally every day, like, I mean, it's the Stephen Colbert at the White House press correspondents' dinner. When George W. Bush was president and sitting right there, there's a joke. This is like paraphrasing, but he's like, this man, like George W. Bush, he is consistent. You can count on that. Like, he believes the same thing on Wednesday that he believed on Monday, no matter what happens on Tuesday.
Oh, and 9/11 was a Tuesday. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Wow. I never even thought about that.
Because Bush really changes. Yeah, they could give a crap about Al Qaeda before that. That's
Right.
That's the one. Yeah, Bush actually is wishy-washy sometimes. The problem with Kerry is he seems like an out-of-touch rich guy who's just telling you what you want to hear. Right. And he doesn't know who he is. And Bush had said, I'm going to beat Al Gore because I know who I am and he doesn't. And then Bush is like, I'm going to beat John Kerry because he's a jerk. And I in the voting booth, when I was voting for Kerry, I was like, this guy's a jerk. Don't screw this up, jerk. Like, douchebag, whatever. So it was true. Kerry did kind of come off like a jerk.
Yeah. But he is still able to win the primaries.
And you know what? I feel like even if he is a jerk and people would want to have a beer more with George W. Bush, I feel like that's the first presidential candidate that I remember people like, yeah, I just feel like I could have a beer with. Like, well, then elect Kerry to be president and you'll have a lot more time to drink with your buddy when he's not in the White House. Hang out,
Right.
drink a beer with George W. Bush and let this better for the job jerk.
Yeah, but the problem with the beer thing is ironic because George W. Bush was sober.
Yes.
Which was maybe one of the most fatal decisions anyone has made over the past century. Because if he had stayed an alcoholic, he likely would have never become president, I think.
Wow.
Oh, no, absolutely. Yeah. It was tough even without drinking. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it was like 500 votes in Florida. Yeah, if he's drinking, he's gonna screw that up.
So he has this vote for the $87 billion. He's voted to approve some of the project earlier, but then he doesn't want to give the money because he doesn't like the way the Bush administration is handling the war. It's very convoluted. Later,
there was promises of the oil was going to pay for the war, which then immediately we're just paying for the war, and a lot of it's going to companies like Halliburton, Cheney's old company. And also then Kerry is like, well, shouldn't we raise taxes on the rich to pay for it? Because they had just done a couple tax cuts for the rich. But it's an up or down vote. And then he's just like, well, I'm going to vote against it. And he's not going to be able to explain that well enough.
Yeah. And he's also, when he says this, because it doesn't become a soundbite for a few months, I think. Actually, the vote happens in October, and then the soundbite comes about in the spring. That's right. But he's in the fall, when he's around the time he's making this vote. Campaign isn't going that well. Even though he's a rich guy, he's low on campaign funds, so he has to mortgage his house to fund the campaign, essentially.
It was ballsy, yeah. Kerry did believe in himself.
Yeah.
That is one thing which, he doesn't know what else he believes, but he does believe in himself.
And that was kind of his campaign. It was like me. I'm a smart guy, and I served in Vietnam. The primaries, Dean kind of melts in Iowa. Dean Scream. And Kerry, after Iowa, he kind of wins every primary. But we did watch a really interesting video from this time period. This is before the voting starts, but he goes on Hardball with Chris Matthews, who at the time was doing these college tours with the primary candidates. And he's at Harvard with John Kerry. And it really, you would think that based on how this went, the campaign would try to figure out a really cogent response on Iraq, but it just it seems like it gets worse and worse. And by November, there's still just no clear response on what his position is. Matthews asks, were we right to go to war with Iraq? And Kerry says, not the way the president did it. And so it's like, well, would you have gone to war? And he just like will not say whether or not, if he was in that position, he would have gone to war in Iraq. And it basically is saying that there should have been inspections. But Bush like prematurely ended the inspections.
Oh, absolutely.
And Kerry even says maybe they'd still be going on now in like fall of 2003. Maybe we'd still be having inspections. But I don't know. You read
he's saying the thing with the inspections is they were only happening because Bush had threatened war. So if Kerry was president, we never would have kind of gotten into that mess. But he won't paint it that way. I do think people should listen to the Blowback season 1. They just go so well into all this stuff. We're not going to get into all the Iraq War stuff, but we are going to get into how Matthews just destroys Kerry in this interview. Yeah. And if more people watch, maybe Kerry wouldn't have gotten nominated because Matthews is firing 100 in this interview.
Right. I mean, you're not going to find the weapons, so they're going to be looking for a long time because they didn't have weapons. But he basically, his criticism of the Iraq War and Bush's execution of it is that it wasn't an international effort, and that's a theme throughout his campaign. Is you should have waited to get approval from the UN and had everybody on board. And Matthews is like, okay, so what if they don't want to do it? And he's still kind of like, well, if I had to, I would do it anyway. It's like, well, would you have had to do it?
What do you mean had to?
Yeah.
That's so interesting. Like, I mean, I feel like the truth would have been good. That like he went in too soon. He went in too aggressively. Like he
lied to us.
Yeah, I would have wanted to get more information. Like if we got the requisite amount of information that then we learn that we should go in, then yes. But based on, I mean, I feel like his answer of like, I wouldn't have done it like he did, like that was a good start.
Yeah.
But that was as far as he got, I guess.
Right, yeah, and it never really improved, his answer.
Well, I would answer it way better. Glad I don't have to.
Yeah, at one point he talked about how Michael Dukakis wouldn't fight back when negatively attacked, and he says, I will fight back if I'm negatively attacked. And fast forward, he's not going to fight back when negatively attacked.
Right, yeah.
Interesting.
But there's even a question in this show about.
Yeah, let's act. How about I be Matthews and you be Kerry?
Sure.
What's your favorite movie?
I love movies. I've watched movies since I was a child, and I love them.
This isn't like if you were for or against Iraq War. This should be a simple answer.
I don't have a favorite movie. I like Animal House. That is one of my favorite movies, not exclusively my favorite movie. It is on the list. Yeah, he can't. He
doesn't even have a favorite movie. He can't. Yeah,
he does have a favorite book, but it's like a Leon Uris book. That's maybe the least relatable thing he could say.
Yeah.
Also, if he had said immediately, he said, "What's your favorite movie?" and he said, "Animal House is one of my favorite movies." That's acceptable. You're allowed to have multiple favorite movies. Yeah. You don't have to have just one. But the first part, I like movies. Yeah. That's not the way. Like. That's just is that like debate prep training? Be like, all right, vamp for a while until you can figure out which talking point is going to be the one for that. We don't have this one.
Yeah.
I guess Animal House could be one.
Yeah.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, and he's basically going to say what his favorite movie was when he was 8, and he's going to go through his whole life story. And Matthews is like, no, you need a simple answer to questions.
I liked Princess Bride was my first one. We saw it when I was in the 3rd grade. And then I definitely liked Fight Club and Wet Hot American Summer. Those are different. Die Hard. Die Hard's a good one for sure. I loved The Matrix.
What if he had gone in on like Cronenberg Crash?
I think the right answer was either Air Force One or Independence Day. If you're running for president in 2000, those are the 2 most presidents kicking ass movies.
Oh yeah.
True.
Ooh, can I tell you? I have a bit I'm working on briefly about the movie Air Force One.
Love that movie. Good.
Fantastic. Do you guys know the name of Harrison Ford's character, President, in that movie?
No.
His name is President James Marshall, which I think is a fantastic like fake president name. Like James, I think the most common first name for a president. Marshall, you know, there's Thurgood Marshall. Like Marshall seems martial law. It seems like it's associated with presidentiality.
The Marshall Plan.
Yeah.
And that's one of the more popular presidential activities that helped get Truman reelected to be a dork.
James Marshall is the name of the president played by Harrison Ford. And so my joke is just that I think the only more presidential name they could have made up with is Harrison Ford.
That is a very,
That one's
true.
made of two actual president names.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Actually, three. There's two Harrison presidents.
Oh, amazing. Even better.
Yeah, one got to serve longer than a month.
Nice. Oh, yeah. You got your Ben. You got your...
Yeah, Ben's the reason the Electoral College is so screwed. They made up all those Western states under Ben.
Oh, wow. And he's also the one who made it so that he's the in between the Grover Clevelands.
Yeah.
What a weird thing that they then... So they're like, Grover Cleveland, you're number 21 and 23 or 22 and 24.
Yeah.
It's like, but that's not how counting works.
Yeah.
Like, we're like, oh no, of course, we're going to now elect our 46th president. And that means that it'll be the 45th person to be president or,
It's very convenient. And we might be on the doorstep of that happening again. Yeah, Joe Biden may become the Benjamin Harrison of this century. Hopefully not.
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, we'll see. So after Iowa, he's able to really change the campaign around. He starts utilizing his veteran pals who he serves with in Vietnam, and I think that's kind of why he wins the primaries. Is just because like veteran, boom, war hero. Wesley Clark. He is a general, but he's like politically inexperienced, and Kerry's the guy. He's able to win basically every state except for a few on Super Tuesday. Edwards comes in second in a lot of places, including in Iowa. Dean comes in second in New Hampshire, but that isn't enough. He basically just wins Vermont, I believe, Howard Dean.
Yeah, Dean only wins Vermont. I think, and this might have been changed depending on how you think of Bernie in 2020, but if you win Iowa and New Hampshire, you get the nomination every time. Bernie sort of won Iowa and New Hampshire in 2020. I think he sort of maybe tied in Iowa and didn't get it. But until this point, Iowa, New Hampshire, you're good. You can become the nominee with only winning the two whitest states.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah, I think that's going to change, frankly. But
Also, I would love it if, like General Clark, he wasn't politically savvy. Like that should be a strength. I feel like that should be what people are running on. Be like, I don't know anything about politics.
Yeah. It is interesting to think about we'll do an episode on him too, but we'll see like if he could have won because he had like a coalition. Michael Moore, as we said, was supporting him, but he was also like the establishment was frightened of Dean, but they had Wesley Clark. But he was kind of to the left of Kerry on the war because he was able to say, I was from against the war.
Because he knew things about war.
Right. And there's a whole thing about he gave an interview later about what he saw at the Pentagon before the Iraq War.
Oh, great. Yeah. I'm excited for that episode.
Yeah, a little teaser there.
A lot of this pod is just us hinting at future episodes. And calling back to the Dukakis episode, of course.
It's like an Avengers movie.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, yeah, these are our Avengers, yeah.
So it is kind of a new phase of American politics in that the general election really begins in the spring because the primaries are wrapped up fairly quickly. So the Bush campaign focuses on Kerry. He gives him a call, congratulates him for becoming the nominee, presumptive nominee, but everybody's dropped out, and they are successful in really defining Kerry early on. There's a line Kerry has that he's going to fight a more sensitive war on terror, which Cheney seizes on. There's a lot of lines like that where he's giving like maybe a nuanced dissection of something, and they seize on a line that they're able to weaponize.
Yeah, like there's a good Bush quote. This is February 24th. The primaries are still going on, but Bush is like, the Democratic field's an interesting group because it both supports and opposes the tax cuts, NAFTA, the Patriot Act, and supports and opposes the Iraq War. And that's just one senator from Massachusetts. So he's on message real early before Kerry's even technically the presumptive nominee.
Right.
He's not a flip-flopper. He's like a quantum, politician.
He's
It's Schrodinger's viewpoint.
Yeah, on SNL, the guy playing Bush on SNL, which is Will Forte at this point, he's like, you don't know who Kerry will be against next. He might be against you.
right. But by April of 2004, the Bush campaign takes a hit because of Abu Ghraib, which is a national story, national scandal, even though early 2000s, America is a very nationalistic place and wants vengeance. This is seen as rightfully really obscene. What they
Not like that, vengeance.
Yeah. The problem is the people who did it took pictures, and there's like pictures of a woman with a leash around a guy's neck. There's another picture where a guy's like standing on a podium, and they tell him if he falls off, he's going to get electrocuted. There's some like really horrible pictures, and it's just like, what the hell are we doing?
Yeah. So that does make it kind of a competitive race. Kerry's platform includes the 2 years of like national service or local community service. You get to get 4 years in a public school.
Can I give you can I do the West Virginia thing?
Oh, sure.
So basically, Kerry's already looking good. He's going to West Virginia to campaign, and Bush airs an ad about this, the $787 billion while he's in flight. He lands in West Virginia. He's doing a veterans event, and that's when he's like trying to make it seem nice to the veterans that he voted against this funding bill. So he's like, well, I actually voted for the $787 billion before I voted against it. And that moment basically sinks his campaign because they're able to use that in commercials. He later goes windsurfing, and they're able to get the windsurfing footage and put that line in. And it's such a boon for the Republicans.
Yeah.
Do you want to go ahead?
Well, yeah. No, I mean, I think that ad was like edited. It was like re-edited once he had the line. Right?
Yeah.
Once they said the thing to the veterans.
Yeah, they add the windsurfing in. Yeah, so they do an ad to prompt it. They kind of trap him. And then when he says the line, they use it. And like one Republican staffer is so excited, he runs around in a beret excited. I think they have a beret because they're ready to call John Kerry French.
Yeah.
And Ed Gillespie, I need to find the quote, but Ed Gillespie basically says, like, there's nothing I could have said as chairman of the RNC about him being a flip-flopper that would have worked nearly as well as what he said that day in West Virginia. So and this is like March, already by March, they've gotten Kerry to make his fatal mistake, which is very early in the campaign.
Right. Even though then the Abu Ghraib thing happens, and he could have been like, well, I'm the candidate that's not responsible for ridiculous, absurd torture.
Right.
But not good enough.
I don't know if Kerry. Yeah, I didn't think Kerry mentioned Abu Ghraib enough in the stuff I saw. I'm not saying he never mentioned it, but it just doesn't come up enough.
Yeah. But the rest of his platform, he's for, it seems like kind of like a proto-Obamacare system, private insurance, but
people had never heard of Obama, so they're like, what is Obamacare? Yeah.
That was his big mistake, is saying that he's for Obamacare. That's what I want to do. They're like, what? Osama? What?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that guy's name is terrible. Yeah. Yeah, it's basically like you can buy into the Congress's health plan.
Right.
And I mean, you figure Congress has good health care, but then he's like, it'll save you $1,000 on premiums a year. Like, it's not, he'll call health care right, but it's like it's insanely technocratic what he wants to do.
I mean, and it feels like it is kind of based on that slogan, just saying, well, you should have the same health care we get.
Yeah.
You should.
And as we should, but as Kucinich pointed out at the time, most senators, congressmen are rich, so they already have really good health insurance. So the congressional plan isn't necessarily even that good.
Yeah, they can afford a high premium. I'm not sure how high their premiums were, but they could afford a high premium. Especially John Kerry, that's the thing with John Kerry is like he's worth at least $750 million, maybe like billions, and he's literally a billionaire running for it because if you adjust for inflation or whatever. So
but he wanted to raise taxes on the wealthy, and he was really steadfast in saying that he was not going to raise taxes on 98% of the country. And national security was a big issue in this race. He would talk about the docks being insecure and point out that planes, like people go through airport security, but the cargo holds are not inspected enough. And the docks, shipments would come into the U.S. And we wouldn't know what's in them. I remember that point actually being mentioned by Tony Soprano in an episode of The Sopranos.
Oh, yeah.
I think the writers were probably Kerry supporters, and that
Yeah.
they remembered that.
Yeah, I remember his catchphrase for a while was "What's up, docs?"
It was crazy. Like after 9/11, basically, like Bush and everyone, they actually made us more scared. They're like, well, 9/11 was bad, but like the terrorists are going to sneak nukes in here and like put them in a suitcase, and everyone in New York's going to die.
Yeah.
And like it's really, you're supposed to calm people down, but it's the opposite that's going on.
I remember my teacher saying, and this was a really good teacher, who was also a very progressive, I found out later, but she said that, like, well, next time it's not going to be New York City, it's not going to be Washington, D.C. They're going to get some random skating rink in Omaha, Nebraska, and they're going to blow up. They're just going to instill fear in the American people by blowing up, random places, which would have been a good tactic for Al Qaeda to do, but they really did not have their shit together, and the extent to which they actually existed as this international force was greatly exaggerated by the West. But I remember one of them taking credit for wildfires.
Oh, yeah.
Which I was not Al Qaeda, but he said, "Oh yeah, that's us. We're causing those fires in California."
in a global warming, climate change kind of way.
Yeah.
Like we are contributing to the carbon the footprint. So that was kind of us.
Yeah,
That's come back though. That's Marjorie Taylor Greene with the Jewish space lasers causing the fires. At some point, they were saying China was causing the wildfires. Yeah, this has been tried again.
yeah. Some of his slogans: "Stronger America," "Let America be America again." I don't know what that means. "Stronger at home, respected in the world," which is a key slogan for him because he's on foreign policy very much an internationalist. That's his criticism of Bush, is that he's too unilateral and he has to engage with the quote-unquote international community, which is maybe not, I mean, I don't disagree with it, but maybe not the best message in post 9/11 America.
It was bad that Kerry was running and he could speak French, and then France had gone against the war, and Kerry's wife is like Portuguese, and these are just like, even though these are cool things, like they're used against him.
Yeah. There's one speech where there's pro-Bush protesters, and he says, "Don't kick them out. I'm glad they're here because they're open-minded. They're going to learn a lot."
Wow. He probably kept calling them French fries.
Yeah. Freedom fries.
Yeah, the Congress cafeteria really did that. I think they called it Freedom Toast instead of French Toast. So like
Liberty Toast it was.
Oh, nice. Okay, there. See, this is where we're to get you.
Liberty Toast and Freedom fries.
Yes. Yep. So yeah, this was a thing that was done by the government. This wasn't just some fringe conspiracy thing.
Right.
Don't even say fringe. It sounds too close to French.
Oh God.
Fringe toast.
I mean, meanwhile, this whole time, Bush has been preparing. He had in Ohio, nationwide, he only had 22,000 volunteers in 2000. By 2004, it's 80,000. And they are locking in Ohio as kind of the Florida of 2004. This is going to be where the election is decided. And it's competitive in part because of deindustrialization. This is over 10 years after NAFTA was passed, and the Rust Belt has lost a lot of jobs. And Kerry does also make that a theme in the campaign. He would talk a lot about offshoring and trade, but he was always pro-NAFTA, pro basically the whole free trade regime as a system. He just wanted technocratic fixes, such as like some of the more blatant tax breaks that companies would get for like packing up and leaving the U.S. He wanted to do away with. Whether or not it still would have been profitable for them to leave and go exploit third world labor, I think is still dubious. But I mean, Biden has kind of pursued some of this tinkering with trade and trying to motivate American manufacturing. But I do think this was effective because I think this is what made Ohio a swing state, because Bush was really bad on the economy, and people across the political spectrum saw that. So it was really other issues that it came down to.
Yeah, and Bush had won Ohio in 2000, so they're trying to take it from him. And no Republican had won the White House without Ohio in a very long time. I'm not sure. I think Trump got Ohio the year he won, so
Yeah.
it's probably still true.
Well, I mean, now it's a Republican state.
Oh,
And
yeah.
It had been, it was really just under, I mean, I think Clinton won it, but under Obama, he won Ohio both times, but Biden didn't win it. So I think now we've kind of said, whatever.
Ohio.
Yeah.
But Tad Devine, one of Kerry's advisors, said the personal attacks, voters didn't like that, and this comes up in the documentary we watched, because what the Kerry campaign thought was that we have to remain positive because voters don't like this negative stuff, this personal stuff. We have to be focused on the future. But what the Clinton people would say, Paul Begala, who's interviewed, is like, of course people say they don't want negative ads, but obviously they're still effective and you should use them. And that's maybe a mistake they made, is not going hard enough on Bush, including on 9/11, which is kind of amazing that didn't come up, as like you had 8 months where you were being warned that these people are literally, the warning was determined to attack inside the United States, and you didn't stop it. I mean, it would have possibly blown up in his face, but I mean, I would hope they at least considered that, because, it worked for Trump in those primary debates. He said to Bush's brother, "What do you mean he kept us safe?"
Yeah.
9/11, I was there,
And they have video of Bush on his ranch the month before 9/11. And basically, Condi's the NSA person. She's like, I'm appointing committees to study stuff. She's thinking in Cold War terms, and it couldn't be less like the Cold War. They definitely could have made a windsurfing like commercial with Bush, like cutting brush in his or bushes, whatever,
Right.
in his ranch before 9/11, just not a care in the world.
Look at that. He is Bush, but he's cutting a bush.
Yeah. Flip flop.
Yeah, I mean, it's fun because there are people who argue that was all fake. He got this ranch and that he's really from Connecticut. I think he grew up mostly in Texas. I think the accent is authentic, but he did reportedly just kind of start whacking brush and stuff in a way, like he didn't actually do that stuff before he wanted it to as like a media thing to the photo ops. And so that was like fake, and he was able to utilize it effectively. But Kerry actually liked windsurfing and snowboarding, and it looked silly because those are like rich guy activities. But as one of the Bush people said, they think he actually thought that it made him look cool.
Oh, yeah.
He thought that the people would see him windsurfing and be like, all right, nice. This guy's athletic and skilled.
Yeah, see, Kerry's actually a jock. Like, he wasn't that good in school, and he plays a lot of sports, including soccer, which would have hurt him if they brought that up. But Kerry's just the nerdiest jock ever, and it hurts him. And Kerry's also, like, he's a very serious bicycle guy, including till, like, fairly recently. But he has the $6,000 bike. So he's, like, even when he's athletic, he's rich and out of touch and doing weird European-ish sports.
He's the nerdiest jock and the most Republican Democrat.
How did he not unite the country?
Should have been perfect.
But they, from the beginning of this general election phase, the Kerry campaign is mentioning his Vietnam experience all the time, where it kind of becomes like the message of the campaign is just like, this guy was in Vietnam. And the Bush people from the jump see that they're overplaying their hand there. But as Ken Mellman says, they set it up for people, not the Bush campaign, but just people who could say that the service wasn't what it was cracked up to be, his service in Vietnam.
So the big thing in Vietnam is, like, it seems like Kerry served reasonably heroically. He did save some lives, but he came back and said, we're doing war crimes. And a lot of veterans hate him, including people who were on those Swift boats with him. And they're willing to kind of say stuff to submarine him because they think he broke some kind of a code or betrayed his country or whatever.
Right. There's an interesting point from, I believe it was Michael Wolff, who was interviewed in one of the docs we watched, who was a journalist, and said that the Swift boat ads were effective because he said they were true. They were not literally factually true, But he did come home and turn against the war, and that's the truth they locked. And that was actually the motivation behind a lot of those guys who were, some of them were lying, but others were just kind of saying that Kerry's lying about what happened in Vietnam. But what they meant by that was that it's a bad war. He was lying about it being a bad war, and so they didn't like it politically, and so they came to Bush's aid there.
It was a pretty bad war.
It was, yeah. And you would,
as far as war, I mean, war is bad.
yeah,
But it's like the wariest. It's one of the most war.
right.
It's real bad. It's
You
real
would
bad.
think by 2004 people would look back on that and say we shouldn't have done it, but it still was a very salient topic into that period.
Yeah, we'll get into Vietnam regrets is like a religion. The POW thing became like a religion. We're gonna get into one of the Perot recap episodes. It's insane.
Yeah.
How people people could not process Vietnam, especially if they thought America had never lost a war before.
Right. One of the arguments in retrospect is that Bush was motivating his base. He had really good data, too, and could identify where people who would vote for him were and how to turn them out. And Kerry was too focused on swing voters and not enough on the Dean strategy, who, ironically, does become the DNC chair after this and is arguably responsible for helping Obama get elected. Where if you look at that campaign, it's more of a base campaign. It's not that he's not talking to swing voters, but it's more focused on turnout, where Kerry, some people say, was trying to get people in the middle, and that's a faulty strategy.
As far as I know, Dean's the first guy to raise political money with a website, which is now how it's done. But that was a huge innovation, and obviously Obama takes that to the stratosphere later on.
Right. So, speaking of Vietnam, John McCain, obviously POW, and he, rival of Bush in 2000, Republican. He was kind of close to becoming Kerry's VP pick. It was him who kind of courted the Kerry campaign because he hated Bush. He was still really mad about 2000 in the South Carolina primary, so he wanted to defect. He was eager to. It seems like the real issue was he wasn't going to accept a pledge to never appoint an anti-Roe v. Wade judge. But there was it was one of those things he definitely wanted to entertain, but once it came down to it, he wasn't able to do it.
I feel like maybe behind the scenes, the Bush people, the establishment's like, if you play ball with us, you can be the nominee in 08. I feel like there's something.
Yeah, that
because
makes
by
sense.
08, he's completely neutered. He's kind of an establishment Republican, and he's much less of a maverick.
Right.
But I could see something going on behind the scenes because he had a lot of reason to hate Bush, and it was the kind of thing he would do.
Right.
And it worked perfectly. He got the nomination in 2008.
Yeah.
Just as he wanted.
Yeah. I do remember at that, I mentioned the State Fair of Minnesota where I was carrying around the Kerry Edwards sign. I held that up at a John McCain speech where he was speaking in favor of Bush. I remember SNL actually had a great segment at the time where it was like a cartoon. I think maybe Robert Smigel did these cartoons, but it was like of John McCain speaking on Bush's behalf, and then he'd be like, "Excuse me for a second," and he like went into the green room and like smashed his head into the mirror and did like the apocalypse now. Like,
Oh my
this
God.
is the end. Like, that's a great sketch or a great cartoon. So McCain is out. Kerry does consider Bob Graham, who maybe they should have been the nominee. He was like from Florida, swing state, and was against the war. Maybe he would have won. And Dick Gephardt, who later Kerry says he should have gone with. He was good with Midwestern voters, Missouri, good with the unions.
He's a big trade, guys. We covered in '88. Now, the one thing is, this would have been a fully Riz-less ticket. Okay, no two guys have less Riz than John Kerry and Dick Gephardt, so it would have been a little bit challenging.
But also, we didn't even know what Riz was at the time. So
Yeah, if somebody were to say this ticket has no Riz in 2004.
We could feel it, though. Yeah.
Yes.
Even the name Dick Gephardt just sounds boring.
Yeah, true. I mean, Kerry says he should have gone with him now, but and there was a paper that actually ran with him getting the nod, and I remember they printed out Kerry picks Gephardt, and it turned out ended up being like a Truman, Dewey Defeats
Truman, yeah.
But according to Mary Cheney, who is a lesbian, she says in her book that she was sure Kerry wouldn't pick Edwards because he was absentee as a senator. He didn't show up to the Senate, and didn't hang out in North Carolina enough. He had only won the South Carolina primary, but Dick Cheney said at the time, John Kerry will always take the path of least resistance, which means he'll take the guy who finished second and is really, as we said, really trying to be vice president to raise his profile. So Kerry goes with him. He has a checklist which apparently included not running against John Kerry in 2008 if Kerry were to run again. Which
if Kerry, I think only if Kerry had lost. Yeah, it's like a non-compete. Also, why are you anticipating losing and then being potentially nominated again?
Wow.
Right. Told you so election.
Quick question: does the Mary Cheney being a lesbian play an important role?
It does.
Oh, yeah, it ends
yes,
up.
it
Okay,
comes
great.
up.
Okay, we're not there yet.
Oh, yeah, we're not yet. John Kerry brings it up that awkwardly.
Yeah,
we were
I was doing another Kerry.
Also, at one point in my research, I decided I disliked her because she's not just like a lesbian living her life. She's working with her dad really closely on a pretty anti-gay, anti-abortion campaign.
Yes,
Right.
that seems relevant.
Yeah. But then she's seen as sympathetic at certain points. Yeah.
I'm sorry I wasn't enough of a Kerry head to know the reference. It was a deep cut for me.
Yeah. But I mean, Edwards was from North Carolina, which maybe, became a swing state. Obama won it 4 years later. And he was arguing when he was running in the primaries and ostensibly for vice president that he could bring back the South. Because it wasn't that long ago that Clinton was winning places like Arkansas and Tennessee. And, that he would be the guy equipped to do that.
Yeah, at that point, the Democrats had never won without the South. There's an Edwards argument that he was gaining in Iowa, and like if he had been the nominee, he basically would have been Obama 4 years earlier.
Right. So he goes with Edwards, and apparently on the other side, Cheney was flirting with leaving the campaign as well, right?
Flirting like a big pussycat?
Yeah.
Like Rumsfeld?
He was the least sexy cabinet member,
God.
Because, there's Condi, there's Colin Powell, So Cheney's basically was like, he's very unpopular. He's seen his corrupt with Halliburton. Also, if Cheney leaves, to go to private industry, he's going to get paid a lot of money again. And he's like, well, my strength on the ticket last time was experience, and now you have all this experience. You don't need me. So maybe he's offering to leave very unselfishly. But also it might be that he wanted to get it out of the way, figured Bush would say stay, and then it wouldn't be an issue later on. So it could have been like a double thing.
Yeah.
There's a lot of debates. Most of the memoirs say that Bush was in charge of his White House and it wasn't Cheney, though maybe Cheney had a little too much power very early on.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I know they butted heads on the Scooter Libby pardon, where Cheney
absolutely.
was like furious that he just assumed Bush would pardon Scooter Libby, and Bush was like, I'm not doing it. I'm not going to talk about it anymore. But yeah, that would be interesting if he brought on somebody else. I wonder who it would be.
Yeah, Cheney's less powerful in the second term, and some books even say like Bush basically moves a little bit to the left on foreign policy, and Obama basically and Bush kind of just do the same policy. Second term Bush, and then the 2 terms of Obama. So there's different thoughts on that.
I mean, if you talk to a lot of people from just Africa in general, they will say he did save like countless lives with his AIDS policy, which did apparently piss off Big Pharma. Because I mean, I think he like in the middle of the night was just feeling this extreme guilt about Iraq, to the extent he can actually feel guilt, and was like, I got to do something to make up for this. And so he did do one good thing.
Yeah, Bush wasn't an occasionally compassionate conservative. Yeah. I don't think he was. He wasn't very compassionate, but occasionally he would care. He gets very obsessed with the stem cell thing at one point. Like he sometimes actually cared about issues.
Right. Well, at the DNC, this is in the summer 2004. There's a big theme. They don't really talk about abortion being under attack. They don't talk about gay marriage. The only social issue they talk about is stem cell research, which is a campaign issue, which is now like I think we just established. Yeah, we need that stuff to make drugs. and anyone who's against it is a crank, and let's go with it. But that was, I think, more of a Bush campaign thing to be like, this is an abortion issue. This is something we have maybe some control over, because at that time it didn't seem like Roe v. Wade was going anywhere. So let's regulate the use of stem cells, because this is a life, arguably, and that can at least gin up the anti-choice base.
Yeah, Bush had basically tried to be like a King Solomon and split the baby on the stem cell issue and like only research on existing stem cells.
Yeah.
And the big thing is that Bush is at his lowest, in 2004. He does a press conference. They ask him, like, what have you done wrong? And he's like, I can't think of anything. And people like, say Abu Ghraib or something. And then they come out with he wants a gay marriage amendment, and there's gay marriage amendments to state constitutions on the ballot. So they're using gay marriage to get the evangelicals out and fire up his base and win.
Yeah.
That is the big thing. And Kerry can't counter that well on the gay marriage, because he doesn't support gay marriage, the name. He supports kind of like doing it as like civil unions.
Right.
But it's it's like kind of effectively the same, but like it's technocratic and it's wishy-washy, and it's not something he's going to be able to get much traction on.
Right. And you have that convention. It's kind of fun in retrospect. Michael Moore is sitting next to Jimmy Carter. I don't know who's behind that seating. But, he's a big name at this time. The Democrats kind of want to treat him, keep him at arm's length, but he's ginning up their base with Fahrenheit 9/11, which I saw and made me invested in this election. So they kind of have to tolerate Michael Moore.
I will say I rewatched it, and it's very boring. It's not.
Really?
His earlier ones are good. Some of the stuff's also just stuff we already know, but it's not. Yeah, it was definitely a movie that only seemed entertaining that year.
But Jimmy Carter, he's pretty exciting. 100 years old now.
Yeah, still, yeah.
Happy birthday. Do you know a quick Jimmy Carter fact? The only one I know. He's the only president to have written more bestsellers, New York Times bestsellers, than were written about him.
Wow.
That's amazing.
Every other president has more or equal, I guess,
prolific.
written about
Bush
them.
Uh,
did not try to compete at that yet.
No.
He has the most paintings, maybe. Yeah, most paintings of people who got injured in a war he started.
Right.
So they do. So Jimmy Carter speaks of this, and Jimmy Carter is a representative of the feckless liberals to everyone at this point, especially on foreign policy. That's how he's thought of. They do a video tribute to Jimmy Carter. They have him speak. It's real. Yeah. It's they highlight Jimmy Carter way too much in this convention.
Mm-hmm. But someone they highlight, I guess, the right amount is a state senator from Illinois by the name of Barack Hussein Obama, which I remember watching this live.
What, Obama?
I thought we took him out. Yeah. I think. Oh, Saddam's still alive at this point. He's been captured, but he's still alive.
Right. I remember them the promo for there's like we're going to commercial, but stay tuned because this next speaker has the same name as an enemy of the United States. And I was like, well, what is this? And lo and behold, this really charismatic state senator running for U.S. Senate from Illinois, it's a famous speech, talks about there's not a red, blue America or a red or blue America. But he's kind of, giving some undergirding some points from 2008, where he's like, even in red states we have gay friends and don't want people snooping around in our libraries. So he's like not running from liberal issues, but he is saying people in red states believe this stuff too, and we should appeal to them.
Even though he was not for gay marriage at that time as well.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, not till after I think he has to get reelected for that.
No, it's before his reelection. It's to kind of gin up the base in 2012. But he says people don't want tax money wasted by a welfare agency or the Pentagon, which is, I guess, centrist. I mean, I give him credit for taking on Pentagon spending, but didn't do that very much as president. So there is a funny moment where Hillary Clinton is really enthusiastically clapping for Obama. which is fun.
She probably really regrets that.
Yeah. We're going to get into this in the Hillary episode, but the question is if Hillary would have won in '04. And there is a question in the debate. So, like, Hillary's way more popular. '04 may have been her best shot.
Really?
You are kind of, and women have trouble doing this a lot of times because of sexism that they face, but running too early actually tends to be better than running late.
Really?
Yeah, that's a problem with Kerry is he has 16 years of senatorial votes they can go against.
Yeah.
Like he was around when they were voting for NAFTA in '92. Obama runs after like 2 years in the Senate, or I guess it's 4, yeah. And Obama's a lock to be a senator at this point because he's running against Alan Keyes in Illinois. And Alan Keyes is a vanquished all-star and not an all-star at anything else.
Yeah. This is like the one convention where Jimmy Carter kind of gets his due because he had a beef with the Clintons, so he wasn't like, seen. He didn't go to the '96 convention. I don't know if he went to '92, but and then in the '80s they were kind of trying to keep their distance from Carter because people still remembered him. So he's finally kind of getting his respect on his name, I guess. They have a tribute video to him. He gives a speech. At stake is nothing less than our nation's soul. Talks about his naval service.
Yeah. It's like, I'm just like John Kerry, and like, don't say that. Don't say that.
Sharpton speaks. Bill Clinton speaks, and he can't stop thinking about how he can't stop thinking about tomorrow, which was his theme song from 1992. He says the Republicans were mean to him in office, but as soon as I got out and made money, I became part of the most important group in the whole world to them, a rich person, and that is a theme that comes up in this race is just raising taxes by a little bit on the super rich.
And that's the problem with politicians. Even if you're working class when you go in, when you come out, you get to be rich immediately. Like
Right.
Obama made $600,000 in a Goldman Sachs speech, like the first day out of office.
Yeah. Another issue in 2004 was the assault weapons ban, which was signed into law by Bill Clinton in 1994, but had a 10-year it had to be renewed, and Bush wasn't going to renew it. Republican pro-gun president, and Kerry wanted to renew it, and that is, I think, ends up being pretty consequential because there still would have been mass shootings, but they would have been less mass without those assault rifles. Oof. John Kerry gives his speech, and he opens it with the infamous, "I'm John Kerry, and I'm reporting for duty," which makes me think that at the time, I feel like there were more porn parodies during this era, and there's got to be something out there like an election porno, maybe a gay porn, where the guy playing John Kerry says, "I'm John Kerry, and I'm reporting for booty."
Oh man, yeah, I do see him only in gay porn and possibly only as a bottom. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I just don't see anyone wanting to watch John Kerry top anybody.
Yeah.
Well, if they don't have that, if that doesn't exist, do you guys think you should make it? I don't know. Yeah.
If the demand is there,
Yeah.
and the price is right, I will do it.
Actually, that is my favorite movie.
People have been asking us for a porn version. Yeah, but we've got a Patreon. We don't have an OnlyFans yet. But yeah, if there's demand, we're open to it.
That would be fun if we made an OnlyFans and it was just us talking about John Kerry and shit like this. There's a book I read, Red Over Blue, about the 2004 election. They say Kerry staked his claim for the presidency on biography to a greater extent than any candidate since Eisenhower. But the difference is, and this may have been a difference if Wesley Clark were the nominee, is yes, biography, military experience, that does play a big role, but if you have to constantly mention it, then that kind of makes it less effective. So Eisenhower was a general, Clark's a general, they're wearing the uniform. You're a guy who served in Vietnam, but you're not going around in the uniform. You're not still in the military. You're only there for a little bit, so he constantly has to mention it, and it replaces the message of like, what are you going to do as president? He says in the speech, "I was born. Guess which wing of the hospital? Not kidding. It was the West Wing," which is kind of presumptuous for him to say that, I guess.
He thinks this is going to make him president. Like, he is so corny. This is a very corny convention. I'll go on.
Yeah.
Oh, just saying it's sad now.
Yeah.
To hear that.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, he's like, everything right up is like, everything is leading to this path.
Uh-huh.
It's been ordained. And then and then it wasn't.
Yeah, it's really tough to stake yourself on a war that we lost and a war where you kind of called it out as bad. Like, generals have won, people have won. First of all, you're supposed to be a general, not a regular middle-level soldier, and we're supposed to have won the war.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's appropriate that his initials are J.K.
But yeah, he talks about Bush not having a plan to win the peace. Mentions the backdoor draft, National Guard and reservists that were really preying on poor people. But he's also, he wants to increase the amount of troops in Iraq. So, like, I don't know where he's going to get these new troops. But he's talking about domestic policy, cutting after-school programs, taking cops off the streets. He does, he's voted for the Patriot Act. He does have a classic John Kerry position where he's like, well, but I would do it differently. I would tweak this or that thing. But he does say, I will appoint an attorney general who will uphold the Constitution, which at this point is a very low bar.
And yet it gets an applause break. Like, this is where people are really desperate for something better than Bush.
Right. There's he wants to institute pay-as-you-go, which is like a Democrat thing, oddly, that is just, really ends up being pretty bad because the government doesn't run, the government runs deficits. That's just how economics works. It's okay to have deficits, and they are instituting this rule because of their defensive against the Republicans.
I want to even go further. He says families have to pay as you go. Families in the mid-2000s did not have to pay as you go. They got into tremendous debt, and that's what crashed the economy.
Yeah.
So it was not true for anybody in 2004.
Yeah. And he closes on, I thought this was a good joke. So what do you think, Mike? That he says, now I'm going to say something that Franklin Roosevelt never could have said in his acceptance speech. Go to johnkerry.com.
Ha. That is a funny joke.
It would have been funny if he started running around the stage because, Franklin could not have done that either.
I think that would have, I wouldn't have liked that joke as much if he did that. That's hilarious.
Yeah.
I think because there's two, he would have had WinstonChurchill.com,
Yeah. And then he ends on, they start playing U2, It's a Beautiful Day, when his speech ends. And there is I forgot about, I just remember this. There's like a famous moment where it's like, where are the balloons? Because they take a second to fall. He gets kind of made
where
fun
are
of
the balloons?
Yeah.
Oh, don't say that.
Also, the lyrics are, it's a beautiful day, don't let it get away. And he lets his campaign get away from him right after this.
Yeah. And it's arguably getting away from him during the convention I think because of the Vietnam stuff. They keep talking about that to their detriment. And after the convention, normally there's a bump, but depending on what polls you look at, there's either a very small bump, no bump, or sometimes they actually went backwards in the polls because they were putting his biography ahead of what are you going to do about Iraq, for instance.
Yeah, they're not firing up the base.
Okay. So Fred has in the notes, Teresa, and I wasn't sure what that was. It took me a second.
Oh, that's how you pronounce her name,
Yeah.
It's pronounced the Portuguese way. She's foreign and rich, and she's not relatable to small-town Ohio.
Right. This is the potential First Lady, Teresa Heinz Kerry, who John Kerry starts dating in the 90s. We'll talk about it in the bio episode. They have a very weird first date. Anyway, she's from Mozambique, was where she grows up, and marched against apartheid and is a very strong, opinionated woman. As you pointed out, she's like the president of their marriage.
Yeah, he's not the president of his marriage. And I'm not against that, but it's not... I'm not against it in general, but it's not the greatest look for him. I do prefer her to Laura Bush, who was supposedly liberal but props up all these neocon policies.
Yeah.
Maybe she should have been the president.
She would have been better than George. Definitely. But she's I think, I don't know how much of a role the First Lady actually makes, the wife of the candidate or spouse of the candidate actually makes in the election, but I think her being foreign was kind of a big deal to a lot of people because we hadn't had that since John Quincy Adams, I think. I mean,
John Quincy Adams' wife, Louisa. I'm trying to remember if I think she was Russian. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, obviously with Melania, but Teresa Heinz Kerry gets. I mean, Maya Rudolph does an impression of her that's just kind of like all over the place. Like you can't really pin down the accent almost.
Oh yeah. There's just a lot of ketchup jokes.
Yes.
She's ketchup billionaire. She's a billionaire from ketchup. And it's a lot. Yeah, they have Clinton on SNL. It's like there's 57 things I want to do to you, Teresa, and they all involve relish. So there's just a lot. Her richness, I think, is worse than her foreignness. But either way, yeah, she is a white person from Africa who's basically a billionaire. She's got a lot of that Elon Musk hateability of the time.
Yeah.
I'm also a mustard guy myself. Yeah, but
Okay.
I know Heinz makes mustard too, but it's not. Not the most.
I mean, it's surprising he won Wisconsin, given that they have like very strict rule there that you can't put ketchup on sausage on brats. I don't know if they do hot dogs.
Kerry also seems like he eats Grey Poupon. He doesn't seem like he eats ketchup.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Probably not. I mean, there is a story from this race where, and I remember this being covered on like one of those tabloid news shows, where Kerry and the Edwardses went to a Wendy's, and basically the Kerrys pretended to eat it. They're like spitting it out on the side. They were like disgusted by it.
Yeah.
But they sucked it up and ate it. And then someone got the receipt from their hotel room service and was like steak and lobster.
Yeah.
And all this stuff, and it became like kind of a mini scandal.
There is something in the Edwards book. They send a list of foods that they eat. Like you got to give them specific food. They're quite pampered.
The Edwardses or the Kerrys?
Oh, sorry. Kerry send this to the Edwards team ahead of going there because they're going to eat a meal there, and it needs you need to give them. They can only handle certain foods.
Man,
it's like when you're watching somebody's pet. Yeah.
Yeah.
They have these restrictions.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think basically, if Kerry was president, White Castle could have done an assassination just by feeding him.
Ha.
So then you have like at the end of the summer, the RNC,
basically they do it 6 weeks later, so they have a much shorter general election.
Right.
And they're able to do it in September in New York 3 years after 9/11.
Right, which is very ballsy. A lot of protesters, obviously, but they do have the former mayor of New York, Rudy Giuliani, gives a speech where he's like, thank God George W. Bush was president on 9/11. That's what I said at the time. And you have people in the audience who have Purple Heart Band-Aids. They're already starting to like undermine Kerry's record in Vietnam. And things are really tightening up. Kerry doesn't get a bump from his convention, and after the RNC, or I think slightly before it actually, this is the interview where he's giving like a press conference in front of the Grand Canyon, and he's asked about his Iraq vote, and even at this late stage, he can't give a straight answer. He tries to, but it ends up blowing up in his face, because he's asked, would you have voted the same way, knowing what you know now? And he says, yes, I would have. Because, again, his logic is that, like, the vote wasn't technically for the war. It was just to give the president the authority to start a hypothetical war, and I didn't think he was going to do it, which is bad judgment,
So now, knowing that he didn't do what you thought he would you do the same thing? It's like, well, yes, I can't, if I know now, like the idea that he knows, he knows everything, but he's still like doing hypothetical like loops in his head.
Was it one of the debates? They're like, well, if you had your way, Saddam would still be in power. What do you say to that? And it's just like, there's all kind. You're not allowed to say it, but we all, as young people, just want to vote against the Iraq War.
Right.
That's what we want to do, and we need him to just say, I hate the Iraq War.
Yeah. And before this soundbite, he is up 6 points, and then that starts to kind of whittle away after that. There's also a wonderful photo that lives on from this campaign, where he's in a hooded blue anti-contamination suit and climbing out of a NASA space shuttle.
Okie dokie.
And he looks like a sperm. It's
The big rule we learned from the Dukakis episode is you're not supposed to put the candidate in a funny hat. And Kerry would know about this. He's from Massachusetts. He had been Dukakis' lieutenant governor, but he has many photos in funny hats, some hunting ones too.
Yeah.
Boy.
But, the Swift boat ads came about kind of ultimately by accident because you have this is the first election after the McCain-Feingold law, which instituted campaign finance reform. So you couldn't have like this massive amount of soft money going directly to campaigns, but instead the soft money just went to these 527 groups, which was kind of a win-win situation or for like dirty tricks people because we can't give the money directly to the campaign, but that's actually better because we can put out these ads saying terrible stuff and it won't be traced back to that campaign. They don't even have to know about it or even sign off on it. Although, I think somebody up there in Karl Rove's circle, probably Karl Rove, knew what he was doing with I think they probably helped orchestrate the Swift boat ads, which in case listeners are younger and don't know about this. Basically, they had all these Vietnam veterans who had served on Swift boats, which Kerry had done. These boats that were in Vietnam inspecting things. There was a firefight where he got his Purple Heart from, and there's certain people in the ad saying that he's lying about his what actually happened, and some of them, as we said, mean just Vietnam in general. But Rove is said to, this is his skill as a campaign genius, is he attacks a candidate's strength. Instead of going for their weakness, you take the thing that they can fall back on and you take that away and they have nowhere to stand. And that's kind of what he did with Kerry's war record. But on the other side, you had 527 groups for Democrats that the Kerry campaign said they were frustrated with because they weren't on message. They weren't effectively targeting Bush in the way they should have. Maybe those 527s would say, in turn, the Kerry campaign was the ineffective one. On messaging, there's a line from the documentary where Paul Begala asked somebody at Kerry campaign headquarters, like, what, do we have a message? There's this campaign has no message. And they're like, of course we have a message. It's Josh. It's like, what? Josh, jobs, oil, security, housing. Or healthcare. Jobs, oil, security, healthcare. I don't even know if that's the right order of the acronym.
I think it's spelled JHOS.
JHOS.
You made it Josh, which makes sense.
Which makes more sense. Well, why would they call it J? As he points out, that is not a message. That's a list of issues, but you need one overarching message. And after the fact, there are Kerry campaign people who'd be like, looking back, I don't know what our message was. I don't know what we were running.
Also, Josh is great because Josh was the guy who leads the Israelites to the Promised Land. So, there's all kinds of cool biblical stuff. Mike, go ahead.
I think the message was vote Kerry.
Anybody but Bush was very key. Colbert even makes fun of him for that in a segment he does on the Daily Show. And he's like, well, he started out a lot like Bush, but thank God Vietnam happened so he could become anybody but Bush.
Yeah. I mean, they had those stickers that would say, the real deal. And I did go to a John Kerry rally in the fall of 2004 with my mom and sister in Minneapolis outside the Metrodome. We stood there for hours waiting for him to speak. And it was, at the time, it was exciting. Looking back, not so much. But going into the...
I will say that, in 2000, it was both these guys are kind of similar. Who cares? And in 2004, we cared who won, and that was exciting. In a way, that definitely 2000 wasn't. And I think 96, I think it just seemed like Bill Clinton was going to win, and no one hated Dole. Maybe we just wanted Clinton more.
Right. But after the RNC, they get kind of a bump also because there's a terrorist attack in Russia by Chechens. It's a really awful thing. There's a school involved and bad stuff, and that kind of reinforces the anti-terror message. You also have Bill Clinton going off the campaign trail. He has heart surgery, and he's a real asset to the campaign in getting people out to see these rallies and stuff, and also raising money. I mean, this is kind of it's odd, funny in retrospect because obviously he doesn't like the Clintons and Obamas in 2008 have bad blood, so he's not campaigning that much for Obama. So it's kind of funny to see him like being like the sidekick because he's not president anymore. This is like what he does now. But in the fall, you also have the infamous Dan Rather story. He runs a segment on 60 Minutes too about Bush during Vietnam, and they says he got preferential treatment in order to get into the Texas Air National Guard. So what he was doing during the Vietnam War was just flying around Texas, which he in reality didn't end up even doing. He was AWOL, and I think that story is probably true. Michael Moore would continue to say after the story that, yes, this is in fact true. You had the Clark campaign, who he supported, trying to distance himself from his statement on that, and the Kerry campaign was too scared to run with it. But it ended up being kind of a humiliation for Dan Rather because this website, Powerline.com, which is a lawyer blog, they ran a report, and this is from Red Over Blue, demonstrating that the memos that were supposed to have been made on a typewriter in the 70s, they used a modern font and could be perfectly reproduced, spacing and all, using the Microsoft word processing program. There were other holes they found in the story but Rather maintains that he had a, quote, unimpeachable source. And I don't know, to me, the fact that you can type something up in Microsoft Word and it looks like a typewriter doesn't then mean that it wasn't printed on a typewriter. That's not dispositive. So it seemed like a legit story, and I could definitely believe that Bush in the 60s and 70s was getting drunk and not going to Air National Guard service.
Yeah, it seems like he was AWOL. Like people were like, oh, we're going to service him. We're going to see this celebrity. And like people really didn't see him that much. He's out drinking, carousing. I think during this period, he has a girlfriend who gets pregnant and he pays for the abortion and then never talks to her again, which is, quite the opposite of family values, I would say.
Right. I mean, it rather ends up, he tries to defend it. He has an interview with the secretary, because there are these memos that come out that say, oh, he did serve, and he interviews a secretary who says those don't look authentic to me, and but it ends up he has to apologize, and after that, Dan Rather is no longer like a key, like, trusted journalist, which I think is unfair. I admire him for going after Bush. Which I do think this was kind of a revelation for me, is I'm going to say I think based on this election and other things since then, there is the liberal media thing that conservatives always complain about the liberal media, the liberal mainstream media. I think that's kind of true. Mm-hmm. Because, I mean, they always point out the numbers, like the amount of journalists in like the Washington Press Corps and like establishment media organizations are overwhelmingly like Democratic leaning and liberals. But it was studied. Center for Media Affairs conducted an analysis of this campaign, and they said John Kerry received better press than anyone since 1980.
Oh, my God. Receiving
a record-breaking 77% positive evaluations compared to just 34% for President Bush. And in 2004, two things worked to mitigate this. One being it just felt very blatant to a lot of voters. There's like the media's obviously in the tank for this guy. And also they had, quote unquote, new media, i.e. the internet, like this Powerline.com that was rising up and taking the Republican tack.
I do want to add, if Kerry can't win with a lawyer blog, he's doing it wrong. He's a lawyer. John Edwards is a lawyer. Like it's the lawyer tickets. If the lawyers are against you, you're doing bad.
Yeah. But Mark Halperin even issued a memo in 2004 telling reporters not to. He's working for ABC. He said, "Don't hold Bush and Kerry equally accountable because Bush's distortions are worse than Kerry's." So this feels very reminiscent of the Trump era, where the journalists have finally started to say, like, I guess both sides aren't equal, and we have to like fact check. We have to point out when somebody's lying.
And that makes sense why journalists would lean, more progressive, because they're looking at the facts.
Right. They're looking at reality. Yeah.
I do think they criticize the Dems from the right. Like, they definitely keep the Democrats from going too far left.
Well, yeah, and I think I think it is true. It is a liberal media, that it's not a radical media. But I mean, Noam Chomsky was pointing this out, that there is a liberal establishment media, and they're pro-Democratic Party, but they're also pro-American imperialism. And, they're very biased. Everybody's biased. And
it's the free press.
Yeah.
They're free.
Right. But in the fall, other things going on. There's Bush is helped by the Florida hurricanes. He looks very presidential, but oil prices are going up, which is, according to some people, the entire reason for the Iraq War. That was enough justification to lower oil prices, and now they're going up. And also there's a flu vaccine shortage, and there's a New York Times story on Saddam Hussein's. He had all these bombs laying around that they went missing. They were supposed to be in this U.S. military base, and they went missing. The story itself kind of fizzled out, but Kerry is able to really run on this and hit Bush, and that makes a difference going into the debates, where Bush had an 8-point lead, according to some polls, before the first debate, loses it. And, they wanted to talk about foreign policy. The Bush campaign did, because that's his strength. So let's go out strong. People aren't going to watch the other debates, so let's just go with the first one, talk about foreign policy. We're going to beat Kerry. And he's able to win because it's, it's wonk time, right? It's nerd hour.
Yeah.
Let's whittle down these really specific positions and dissect why the Bush administration is incompetent.
Yeah, I did feel like he won, but in a boring way.
Yeah.
Bush kind of still seems a little bit likable. Incumbents tend to always lose the first debate and then do better in future debates. The one exception was Biden lost in a way where, like, people were like, I do never want to see him debate again, and then he was kind of pushed to retire. But yeah, Bush does do a little bit better in the subsequent debates, and in the third debate, Kerry kind of has a decent gaffe, I would say.
He defends his 80s, or he says, well, I made a mistake about how I talked about the $87 billion, but the president made a mistake in how he went to war. The next thing is the vice presidential debate, which is actually the first time that Mary Cheney becomes an issue. Edwards very casually mentions that she's gay in response to a gay marriage question, and Cheney doesn't take the bait or talk about it. Apparently afterwards, Liz and Lynn Cheney stick their tongues out at John Edwards.
They're sitting in the audience, and Mary in her book's like, they knew how to do a thing that he would see, but they wouldn't get picked up on TV, so they stick their tongues out. Because Mary is just furious.
Yeah.
It's just furious. And then Dick has to respond to what Edward said, and he just like says something quick, and then the moderator's like, is that all you're going to say? He's like, that's it. Because Dick is not going to get dragged down into the mud about his family.
I mean, two women sticking their tongues out and a lesbian is mad?
Yeah.
And the one thing is, Mary is working for the campaign. Like I said, she's his, and the campaign is running on an anti-gay marriage program. So Mary, Mary is for a lot of policies I think are pretty bad, but
right.
She feels it's very unfair to get dragged in the mud, and she's seen as pretty sympathetic.
Yeah. But at the next debate is the town hall, which is where Kerry is asked about flip-flopping and whips out the president is utilizing a weapon of mass deception, and that's these ads, which are calling me a flip-flopper. He then later says, and becomes a real famous clip, is he says the president got $84 from a timber company that he owns. It's counted as a small business. Dick Cheney is counted as a small business in his tax plan. That's how they do things. That's not right. And Bush doesn't know he owns a timber company. He's like, I own a timber company? That's news to me. Anybody need some wood?
It's masterful by Bush. Like, it's just great improv acting, and whether or not he owns a timber company or knows about it, and it's pretty murky, but yeah, it's like he plays it so perfectly for the audience, and no one ends up caring.
But you looked into the timber.
Oh yeah, I looked into it. Yeah, he owns a company. He got it at $80 dividend in 2001. Then he's like, it's in like a blind trust or something, and then they buy some timber in 2003. So like, it's like half true, but like in a way that's like so boring that like it doesn't help anybody.
Yeah.
But on the optics are just like Bush is this guy like you said you want to have a beer with,
right.
And Kerry's this nerd talking about $80 when meanwhile he's worth $1 billion or whatever.
Yeah. SNL makes fun of it. They make a lot of fun of Kerry saying like, I was talking to Jonathan Wilmington in Ohio, and he said, like, he always brings up these like random voters he was talking to, and it's just very boring.
Seth Meyers does a good job. I don't think of Seth Meyers as an impressionist.
Yeah.
I think later on he does.
He just looks a lot like John Kerry.
Oh, no, that's Joe who does people. Yeah. But yeah, Seth Meyers actually does a good job. And Will Forte's a pretty good Bush. Obviously not the best Bush.
Right.
The other Bushes are iconic, so yeah.
But the third debate, the domestic policy debate, is where the lesbian line comes out.
I'll feed it to you. Mr. Kerry, is homosexuality a choice?
Well, I think if you ask Dick Cheney's daughter, who is a lesbian, she would say it's not a choice. And this makes the Cheneys furious, and it just doesn't, for whatever reason, no one cares when John Edwards does it. But John Kerry, I think he's like visibly uncomfortable with invoking this woman's sexuality. And, arguably a shrewd move. It's clearly what he's going for, is that there's all these really reactionary Republicans who are voting for Bush because they, meanwhile, have all these state constitutional amendments banning gay marriage. And that's turning these people who otherwise many of them would not vote out. And Kerry's trying to undermine that, so he points out that
it's there's hypocrisy.
Yeah, it is.
Freddie, can you hit me? Can you feed me that same setup?
Mike, is homosexuality a choice?
Well, I like movies. many kinds of movies.
I'm a big fan of all sexualities.
And the Cheneys are like so ready to go off. They say like he'll say anything to get elected. Dick says that, and then Mrs. Cheney, Lynn says, Now you know, I did have a chance to assess John Kerry once and more, and the only thing I can conclude is this is not a good man. Of course, I'm speaking as a mom, a pretty indignant mom. This is not a good man. What a cheap and dirty, tawdry political trick.
Yeah.
So they're able, to paint him as the jerk, which was their goal initially, and And like I said, people are, he's a guy you held your nose and voted for if you were me anyway.
I mean, it does seem like the way that he did it was stupid. Like, instead of like kind of like passive aggressive, being like, well, if you like, he could have like just made the clear point, be like, hey, like, I think that this is what I think about the subject. And on the other side, there are people who there are homosexuals across the spectrum, across the country, and in Republican families, and they're still working against.
Right.
So when Edwards brought it up, it was to reply to a gay marriage question. Kerry brings it up in like a just do gays exist question, and that sort of makes it work. Also, Edwards is a lot smoother. Edwards is a very charming guy, shades of Robert Kennedy, and Kerry is not.
You think maybe Edwards would have won if he was the nominee?
It's possible. The Two Americas thing was great. Basically there's America that has money and doesn't. That was really great and charming. He hadn't been in the Senate as long, so fewer votes. He might have, a little sex appeal is good. The more charismatic candidate usually does win. So nominating the guy with no riz again is not a great strategy.
Yeah. Well, after the debates, this is a real boon to the Bush campaign. A hot track drops from international superstar Osama bin Laden. He has a tape that is given to the press which is very curious that he would decide to do this. I don't know what his calculus was.
I think he wanted Bush to win. I think he's in the tape. He mentions Kerry by name, so you know it's current, because Osama bin Laden did not know who John Kerry was until like 2003. Nobody did.
Right.
Yeah. And I think he makes it seem like we're in danger and like that he hates Bush, but like it's kind of gets you back into like voting for Bush because maybe he thinks Bush is better for his end of the war on terror too.
Right. It's kind of dragging the American empire to weaken itself in a way. But
and he does live in comfort for the rest of the Bush administration. Well, Kerry probably would have been like, well, wait, is he in Pakistan? Let's kill him. Because Obama does that.
Yeah.
Kerry probably would have figured out how to get him.
Right, and as you said, maybe the Bush people decided he's more useful alive and at large than dead. But just the fact that he's talking and kind of saying it doesn't make a difference for whatever reason kind of seems to benefit Bush. According to some stuff I read, they said it kind of cut both ways, didn't make too much of a difference. He does. He gets Michael Moore in trouble because the way he describes 9/11 is very similar to the opening of Fahrenheit 9/11. So people are like, well, he obviously watched Fahrenheit 9/11, and Michael Moore, you're a bad guy.
He was watching a lot of content. People will post stuff that he was enjoying American. Yeah, he did not hate our content. He hated he hated our presence in Saudi Arabia, but and maybe our freedoms, but not our content.
Wow.
Bush campaign has an ad with wolves going around through the forest. They say weakness attracts those who are waiting to do America harm. And then meanwhile, you have celebrities for Kerry, this is another one of the criticisms of the Kerry campaign is that they relied too much on Hollywood. They were just kind of like sending buses full of celebrities, often B-list, C-list celebrities, to Ohio and just having them try and be like, hey, I'm here, vote for me. There's a guy who's in Succession whose name escapes me right now, who's in the So Does the Nation thing, and he's just like arguing with Bush supporters. Like, it's not maybe a great use of resources. But
I did want to say, like, the celebrities are pretty bad because the guy who's the biggest and just flies in for one event is Brendan Fraser because of The Mummy. So he's like the top billing, and everyone else is like sub Brendan Fraser.
Yeah. I mean, some of them will do campaign appearances, and there's like an election night thing, or it's not an election night thing, but there's a big campaign event with John Mellencamp and Whoopi Goldberg, and this turns out to be a gaffe. Kerry says, on the stage with me is the heart and soul of America. And Bush is like, well, you think the heart and soul of America is a bunch of celebrities? I don't think so.
And the Brendan Fraser thing probably backfired because they're like, oh no, is John Kerry the mummy?
Oh, yes, he's so mummified. Oh, my God. Yeah, he does have a concert with Bruce Springsteen, and Kerry said during that concert he believed he would win. Yeah. So Bruce is powerful. But if New Jersey was a swing state, this would have mattered. But I guess he does not enough to put Ohio over the top.
Yeah. But the later Bush moves, they have some shenanigans, arguably, in Ohio. They say there's all these people registered falsely, people registering in exchange for crack cocaine, and they're using names like Dick Tracy and Mary Poppins. And Ed Gillespie says on Meet the Press, I guarantee if Dick Tracy and Mary Poppins vote, they're voting for John Kerry. I don't know if he's saying that celebrities tend to be more democratic, if that's Hollywood is liberal, and that's why Dick Tracy would support him.
He picks like old, corny enough characters that'll resonate with middle America.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not like, oh, Diddy and Will Smith. You know what I mean? It's Dick Tracy, Mary Poppins.
Right.
He really likes people named Dick. He should have taken Dick Gephardt as his running mate, and Dick Tracy as his attorney general.
Yeah. An all Dick VP debate would have been so cool.
They purge a lot of people from the voting rolls. People who just like haven't voted in a while, and they obviously target urban areas in Ohio, minority communities, and they cut the amount of voting machines in these places. Some had less voting machines than they did just 4 years previous. We should also mention real quick the Red Sox win the World Series, and that's were you in Boston for that?
I was.
What was that like? Was that crazy?
People liked it. The curse was broken.
Yeah.
Since like 1918, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, people in Boston, they really didn't like losing for 80 something years, and then I feel like I don't think they were like setting cars on fire. Maybe they were, but yeah, they were a happy bunch.
I was so happy when they came back from 3-0 against the Yankees. And John Kerry was happy. John Kerry, big Red Sox fan. And that someone had asked him, well, if you had to talk to, if you had to, which would you rather have, the Red Sox win the World Series, you become president? And he would just say, I had talked to God about this.
Right.
And it's possible he asked God for the wrong one.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe he was like, forget being president. I want the Red Sox in. But,
Wow.
yeah. So going into Election Day, there are exit polls that show John Kerry winning handily. Or not handily, but winning by a healthy margin.
There's like a weird Pennsylvania one where he's up by like 16 in like one of the supposedly closest states. Like, it's so good for Kerry, it's like kind of suspicious.
Yeah. And that, does not... And a lot of people since then have pointed to that as being slight evidence that Bush stole the election. But that doesn't necessarily mean that that's what happened, because exit polls have been unreliable in the past, 1988, 1992. It had been a while, but it's possible people were embarrassed about voting for Bush, and they were just like, yeah, vote for Kerry. Any number of reasons why an exit poll could be.
And we'll maybe get into some of the shenanigans in the Patreon, but it is disgusting. Like, in a white area, you just walk in and vote. In a black area, there'd be like 3 voting machines for like a lot of people, and people would have to wait all day.
Right.
So like, there's that manipulation, and it's impossible to calculate how many votes you lost from that. But like, it's just disgusting what went on that way.
Right.
But the one thing is, the margin ends up being big enough where it's like hard to isolate what exactly cost it.
Right. Yeah, we'll get into the bonus or a future bonus what happened in Ohio, whether or not it was stolen. But at the end of the day, I'm against the Electoral College. Kerry lost the popular vote, so in that sense, Bush was democratically elected. Unfortunately. Even though he had lost the popular vote and I think, stole the 2000 election. But he wins.
It is crazy to say, Anders, you're young enough where this is the only Democratic candidate to lose the popular vote in your entire lifetime. Because Anders was born in like 91.
Yes, that's true. Yeah.
So it's and after no WMD, after the worst presidential decision in a very long time, I'm still angry at him to this day for no WMD and losing.
Yeah. Bush wins by 3 million popular vote, wins Ohio by a few 100,000 votes, and Kerry does, though, win Pennsylvania, wins the upper Midwest, so it's a very close election. Turnout went from about half in 2000 to 60% in 2004. And Bush really, I think what clinched it is woman voters, because he improved his lot with women by only about 5%, but that was enough to make the difference in a lot of key states. I remember those stickers, W stands for women.
Oh, yeah.
Which is like, that doesn't feel like a serious argument to me, but I guess it swayed some people.
I think it's that, like, you're a woman, you're in the suburbs, you're worried about terrorism, maybe you're evangelical.
Yeah.
And you're worried about gay marriage. And you don't, even if you're pro-abortion, like, you don't think Roe will ever get overturned. And by the way, by winning this election, Bush gets to appoint Judge Roberts, who gets to be Chief Justice, and Alito, who's like the main driving force behind overturning Roe,
right,
gets appointed from this.
And W could stand for women, so like that is the first letter of it. So it's like, in a wordplay way, like, it works.
It's not wrong.
Yeah. It definitely stood for winning. Yeah, but he was never vanquished.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, he won both times.
I vanquish.
That's it.
Yeah,
that's a quality quote.
So rounding out, I mean, it's hard to not look back and be like, come on, John, you screwed the pooch here. To the position on Iraq is incoherent. However, I remember, having remembered this era, there were a lot of people who actually had John Kerry's position just in real life. I remember talking to people as a teenager where, I was, the first real political act I took was marching against the Iraq War in 2006. And I remember talking to people at the time, and they would say, like, well, yeah, obviously, Iraq War, huge mistake. What a dumb decision, really bad. And I would be like, okay, so we should leave, right? And they're like, well, we can't leave, right? Obviously, we have to stay there.
We broke it, we bought it.
Exactly. Yeah, there's this attitude that we have a responsibility to the Iraqis to continue occupying their country, where if you flip it around and say, if Iraq invaded the United States and then they realized maybe we shouldn't have done that, would you want them to stay for another into perpetuity, or would you want them to just leave as soon as possible?
Yeah, they broke it, you bought it. It's called the Pottery Barn rule. And to me, Pottery Barn seems too rich for regular people, but it's too poor for John Kerry. He doesn't go to Pottery Barn. He thinks that if you broke it, you fix it, I think. So I think he actually gets it wrong, because Pottery Barn is like crap to him, but so it's like a weird thing of just being out of touch.
Right. So looking back at his position, it's like, how could you run on that? But in all these mistakes he made, there's a lot. However, he's running against an incumbent president during a war. Considering that, he actually did pretty damn well. Like, the fact that he came within 3% of the popular vote, within a few 100,000 votes in Ohio, that's actually kind of impressive. And I have to wonder, I think the right thing to do would just be run against the war, say it was wrong from the jump and we should leave. But I don't know that actually would win. I hope it would, but there's a good chance that would have been too extreme, and he would have gotten, or someone in his position would have been McGovern. So maybe his weird idiosyncratic position on Iraq was both his weakness and his strength. Maybe that's the reason for his success, partially.
So sad that war, bad. Whoa.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think if he had attacked Bush, he could have done it. And Bagala says something like, there was 12 ways for Kerry to win, and he attempted none of them. And there was one way for Bush to win, and he did it. Yeah, I think he would have been better with the Supreme Court appointments. Maybe he rolls back some of the Bush tax cuts. Maybe he does the Iraq War a little more intelligently, because the bar was low for that. I do think he had very one-term president energy, so I don't think he'd be able to win again. I'm not sure who they would have run in 2008. McCain wasn't great either, but I don't think I think he would have lost, and then we'd be in a different cycle. Any of these guys would put us in a different cycle, so it'd be weird. No Obama, but yeah.
I think there would have been a lot more windsurfing. I think that would have become the national sport. I think everyone would have thought it was cool. I think ketchup would really have swept the nation even more than it already has. A ketchup in every pot. I second everything Fred said.
I would say the one thing is he cared about climate change. Climate change wasn't as polarized. There's no Tea Party yet. There's not the racist thing motivating people to kind of get against Obama. Maybe he would have done some stuff on climate change, and it would have been helpful. So that's the one thing is the planet might have been better off if John Kerry had won. Even if he would have, I don't think he would have been that successful as a president. The planet might be better off for it.
Right. Yeah, or maybe there would have been. I think a lot of people would have been very disappointed. I think that is safe to say, because a lot of people who were anti-war voting for John Kerry, and then he continues the war. I think that would have radicalized a lot of young people and made him a one-term president. We'll talk about more of this stuff on a future episode, but Mike Kaplan, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, I'm happy to be here as the resident John Kerry expert. I'm glad that I could, purvey all this information to you, psychically, so that you could share it with the world. It's fascinating. It's fantastic. Thank you so much for having me. It was a great pleasure. I love learning from people who are passionate.
Thank you. And where can people find you and your work if they're passionate about Mike Kaplan?
Well, no one else could say this, but johnkerry.com. MikeKaplan.com. Mike is spelled M-Y-Q, then K-A-P-L-A-N. If you put in @Mike Kaplan to all of the places, I have a newsletter at mikekaplan.substack. patreon.com, and mostly just come see me live or get my albums or my specials. Those are on your various streaming platforms. Search for me, and you will find me.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of The Vanquished. If you want the full thing, because there is more, please go to patreon.com/TheVanquished, where you can get the rest of this episode as well as our full episode catalog. You can support our work as well as annoy us in the comments.